Eastern Coast, you are operating on GMT time, so we can say good morning. For the rest of us, I think it's already good afternoon. Welcome to this workshop. It is the third in a series that we have held on measurement of IFFs. And today and tomorrow, we have a lineup of a program of 4 sessions. The first session will be giving us the contextual work on conceptualizing the measurement of IFFs. The second session will be comprised of sharing experiences from different countries. So we shall have that as the last session today. And then tomorrow, we shall start with another session also, where we shall continue with the sharing experiences from different countries. And then we shall conclude tomorrow with the session that is going to cover the guidelines on measurement, but also giving us a sense of what it is that we shall be doing from now on in trying to build capacity to see how we can measure these IFFs from the continent. Now, for the first session, I will have to hand you over to my colleague from UNCTAD, none other than Anu Petola, the Chief of Statistical Analysis from UNCTAD. Anu is going to moderate the first session. Over to you, Anu.
Thank you very much, Alan. It's my pleasure also to welcome everyone to the regional kickoff workshop of pilot activities for measuring illicit financial flows in Africa. As Alan said, the main purpose will be to get us all on par with the development of concepts and methods to measure IFFs, and to hear from you, our pilot countries, about your experience with the IFFs so far, the related data, estimates, and your expectations and plans for the pilot testing. We'll have a busy agenda today and tomorrow. So the first session is here to set the scene with some welcoming words by the African Union Commission, the UN Economic Commission for Africa, and the UN Conference on Trade and Development. These words will then be followed by the first presentations on the goals of our project, on defining, estimating, and disseminating statistics on IFFs in Africa, and then we'll have an introduction to the scope and definitions for measuring IFFs. After these presentations, we will have some time for questions and answers. So let me start immediately by first inviting Dr. Yeo Dosina of the African Union Commission to make his welcoming remarks. Yeo, the floor is yours.
Yeah, merci beaucoup. Yeah, thank you so much for giving me the floor to speak. As I was mentioning to Alan, because the title of the email was sent tomorrow, so I thought that the meeting was tomorrow. So I just quickly prepared something, but I cannot open my camera because I'm in my car driving. So let me read my statement. So let me also, as I mentioned, let me take this opportunity to really thank UNECA, UNTAG, and UNODC for the brilliant work we have been undertaking since February. I think that we have a first meeting around February, and since then you have been doing a fantastic job in countries, and this meeting is about to present that work that you have been doing in countries, and also allow comment and answer from countries, and also planning whatever the country would like to do for the next week, and what are the data gap. So it's really a pleasure for me as a representative of African Union Commission to attend this important meeting. As I mentioned earlier in the February meeting, IFF and domestic resource mobilization is really key for African countries, particularly in this pandemic area, and when we have African Union trying with a special envoys and African Minister of Finance to try to mobilize external resources for support to acquire vaccine and also economic recovery. So we know that the SDR that we are trying to where we are requesting allocation or reallocation for SDR that are being not used by the developed partners so we can relocate to the African countries so that we can acquire pandemic and the vaccine, and we'll have the support SMEs so that we can plan for recovery support. So beyond that, we think that domestic resource mobilization is key, and fighting against illicit financial flow is really important for the continent. Our new commission, you know that we all know that in the beginning of this year we have set up a new commission. So the new leadership is in place, and we really take DRM and fighting illicit financial at the top of the priority areas. So in this regard, we are currently supporting countries and together with IFF in the framework of the inclusive framework. You know that we are currently discussing the inclusive framework with OECD, and we are currently advocating supporting countries so that we can come up with a good deal in the coming two weeks. You know, the end of the discussion of the inclusive framework will be the beginning of the 30th and the 1st July, and we think that with our support we'll get really a good rate of a global tax rate in this regard. And during our last FTC, which is the Conference of African Ministers of Finance, we discussed the importance of the domestic resource mobilization and fighting against IFF, and the minister agreed to set up a subcommittee of experts that will be like an advisory board to ministers, which will meet every year to discuss improving domestic resource mobilization and fighting against illicit financial flow, and produce a report to Minister of Finance and to also AU organ for decision making. And we also planning to appoint one head of state as a champion of IFF on the continent and improving the domestic resource mobilization. And we think that your current work, what we have been doing jointly with ECA and ANTAG and ONIDC, will really inform the work program of the champion on IFF on the continent. We are also working with, as I mentioned in February, we have a joint program with AU, between AU, ECA, EU, and GIZ. This project are commenced, and we will be doing some country assessment and produce country profile. So we think that the indicator framework that we have prepared really help us to do that country profile, and this is very important for us. Yes. So we are really looking forward to have a wonderful discussion, so that we really come up with concrete steps, with concrete work program, so that to really fit in our joint program. We are also currently undertaking a mapping exercise to identify all stakeholders on IFF on the continent. After that, we will organize a steering committee of that project together to define a work program for the coming years. And we think that the work you have been doing, the activity you have been carrying out in the country will really form part of the work program, the joint work program for the steering committee in the coming year. We'll be working together on fighting against IFF in the continent. So I really think that looking forward to the outcome of this meeting. As I mentioned, I think that the outcome and whatever discussion we'll be having in this meeting will really help us AU to move forward with our partners, together with GIZ and ECA and other partners. So thank you so much for allowing me to speak, and we believe that if we put our hand together, we will be able to really support countries in improving domestic resource mobilization and teaming IFF out of the continent, which is the great goal of the African, to enable Africa to really finance Agenda 2063 and the SDG on the continent. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful discussion and wonderful deliberation. And thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the insightful speech on the IFFs in Africa, and for informing us about your current work in this area. Your words strongly reinforce the call for national authorities to measure IFFs, to inform policymakers, and to enable policy action to curb IFFs according to the national priorities in the countries, especially for the recovery from the pandemic and in the context of the 2030 agenda. And we look forward to working very closely with you on IFFs, and we're hoping that the pilots will feed into your projects directly. Next in line, dear colleagues, would be Mr. Bartolomeo Armah. Are you connected today? He's the Director of Macroeconomics and Governance Division of the UN Economic Commission for Africa. Mr. Armah?
Anu, can we swap Anu with Armah with Steve?
With Steve. Okay, let's go.
It's just joining. Yes, it's just joining.
Yeah. So then it's my pleasure to invite Steve McFeely, the Chief Statistician of UNCTAD, to share his words of wisdom ahead of the pilots. The floor is yours, Steve.
Hello, everybody, and greetings from a very sunny Geneva. So I'd just like to welcome you to this inaugural kickoff meeting where we begin this very important work. Over the next 2 days, you'll hear a lot of stuff. A lot of it may sound a bit confusing, a bit complicated at the start, but I reassure you, just don't worry. I think the best way to learn about this stuff is to do it. We've been working on it with our colleagues from UNODC and UNECA for quite a while, so we're used to the expressions, the terms. So if it's a bit confusing at the start, don't worry. As you've heard, this is a very important topic. As we've seen, funding from official development assistance has basically stalled and hasn't really changed in many years. But we see on the other side, leakages from countries can actually be enormous and far surpass development aid. So from a financing for development point of view, or just a financing for kind of domestic economic and social policy, curbing illicit financial flows is crucial to the proper management of the state. So the first step in doing that is to actually try and get a handle on what's going on. So our job is not to stop illicit financial flows, but to contribute to it by understanding the extent and the volume and the mechanisms that are being used to do that. So this is part of a very, very important development project. So with that, I would just like to welcome you. We'll have an interesting road ahead. We'll learn many lessons together on how to measure these incredibly sometimes complex financial flows. But I'm sure together we'll get it done, and we'll make a very, very significant contribution to economic and social development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve, for your welcoming words. Let me now turn to Alan, if Mr. Armah is not online yet, to say some welcoming words on UNECA's behalf. Alan, the floor is yours. And following. Yes, Alan.
Yes. I want to say good afternoon again and good morning to colleagues from the other end of GMT. Unfortunately, Mr. Armah is on the other end and is trying to log in, and it might be delayed. So what he has asked me to say is a big welcome to you. He's excited that since last year, we have been talking to member states, and member states have been responding, and that in February when we met and we spoke of all those nice things that Steve was talking about, some of them were a bit highbrow, but we still grappled with them. And even then we asked member states to self-select and participate in the pilots for measurement of IFFs. And lo and behold, quite a number of you have said, yes, we want to engage in these pilots. And that underscores three things. One, that you are serious about domestic resource mobilization, which Dr. Yewodosina has already highlighted to us as a big push, a big drive on the continent. We want to see as much as possible to use our own resources to fund our own development. And if resources are leaving, then of course we should be uncomfortable and then angry enough to try and stop these resources from leaving so that they can fund our own development. The second thing is to understand that when we are talking about IFF, because of the nature of IFF, perpetrators want to hide things so that they can continue benefiting from IFFs at the expense of the continent. So it is necessarily opaque, shrouded in secrecy, So it really will have to require us at the different levels, the governments as well as the private sector and the international community, to work together to see how we build the capacity. In some countries where capacities are weak, and in some countries where capacities are strong, we cross-fertilize each other and support each other to try and tackle these IFFs. The third level is the level of justice, which is social justice, because Africa is rich. We have resource continent. And then some shrewd people take the resources away from Africa and they take them into other markets where these resources are then used for whatever they use them, sometimes at cheaper interest, earning cheaper interest rates than they would if they were on the continent. And in so doing, they deprive the continent of liquidity, which is required to facilitate development on the continent. So in essence, I think the participation, I can see that we have more than 150 participants on the call. It shows how committed and seriously countries are thinking about this issue, and we are excited. Like Steve said, some of these things we're going to be talking about might be new to you, but don't mind. We have guidelines. Tomorrow we shall be talking about guidelines to help us, work through these things. As for today, we are just excited that you are here. And my director says, welcome. Over to you, Anu.
Thank you very much, Alan. On the agenda, I can see that next is a presentation by Alan, again, on the project. Would you like to breathe for a moment and we go to the concepts that will be presented by Enrico Bisogno and Steve McFeely, or are you ready to go ahead, straight ahead?
Well, I can give a synopsis of the project. I actually can't give a synopsis of the project so that we can delve directly into the conceptual framework.
Very well.
Basically, let me just recollect two things. The project is about trying to mobilize resources for Africa. And it is a process. We have identified sources which are on the continent, which are not giving us as much resources to the government coffers as possible. So we are asking, how are we going to mobilize these additional resources? And because of the nature of IFFs, as I've said before in the director's remarks, UNCTAD, UNODC, ECA, and other members of the task force have been working very hard under this project to try and define IFFs, to try, after defining the IFFs, establish a conceptual framework that will help us then determine the methodologies for measuring IFFs. And once we have measured these IFFs, be able to track them, monitor and track them, and also report them so that we can see the trends over time with the intention that we want to curb them. So really, what we do have is a project that intends to strengthen the statistical capacity of countries in Africa to monitor IFFs and agreed upon methodology that produces robust, consistent, and comparable estimates. I understand that we have many of us on the call, and some people have got their mics open. If you don't have the floor, could you please mute your mic? Mute your mic, please. So one of the key things we are trying to do is to contribute towards development of guidelines to build the capacity materials for estimation of IFFs, to contribute towards the measurement of SDG 16.4.1. The other second one is to help build the data infrastructure, because if you're going to measure, you really need the data infrastructure for the national monitoring systems, especially those who are monitoring Agenda 2030 and in Africa, Agenda 2063. We also want to enhance the capacity to use the data to monitor IFFs in support of national policy. National policy to curb IFFs so that also the fiscus can be boosted, but also national policy to see where the weaknesses are and address them and in good time. So the project has had 4 components. The first component has been the methodological work. And that methodological work has entailed undertaking a review of the research, scouting the state of knowledge across the globe, trying to harmonize the concepts, and developing common methodologies to measure IFFs. The second element is capacity building, because after coming up with these methodologies, the question is, how do we employ them? As we shall see the next 2 days, a number of features or a number of attributes exist that we need to leverage. So it will be about preparing the conceptual and methodological guidelines, many of which are in advanced stages, the training materials, and then provide workshops to different government officials to try and carry out the different roles. And this we will do in the 3rd phase, which is the phase of pilots, which we are moving into now, where we want to test the proposed methodologies with you, member states, to see how well they work, which ones work better for you, and also to fine-tune them given the circumstances on the ground, so that you are better able to collect the information required and also produce, estimate the IFFs and report on them internationally, but most importantly to your own constituencies at home. The last stage is after we have gathered all the lessons from these pilot activities that we are going to be carrying out. How do we disseminate these lessons? We are now talking about 12 countries on this call, but we are talking about 54 countries on the whole continent. So we have a burden, the 12 of us who are here, to see that we generate the lessons and the knowledge, that code of knowledge that then we can disseminate to the 54 countries so that they are also equipped better to be able to tackle the IFFs going forward. So I think over the next 2 days, we will be telling you about what it is that we have done. All the way from 2017 in July, when the General Assembly adopted the SDG indicator framework and designated UNCTAD and UNODCs as the custodians for the indicator 16.4.1. The work that has been done, which we're going to be told about soon by Steve and Enrico on the conceptual framework and the methodologies, and also some of the, I would call them bureaucratic steps that we have gone through to get these methodologies agreed internationally. And since they have been agreed internationally, they've given us a go-ahead to try and work with member states to see how we can adapt them within each country and see how they work so that we can also report back. And of course, there are guidelines that we're going to be talking about, and that is one of the things that is coming on later on. So in a nutshell, I just wanted to give a sense that there is a project that has been going on with those objectives, and these are the key components in terms of the activities that the project is carrying out. And what we are going to explain to you are some of the things that have happened, and we would like to hear from you what your experiences are in the countries. So we are all on the same page in terms of understanding what is that side and you understanding what is this side, so that we can see where the common ground is, where we spring from going forward. Back to you, Anu.
Thank you, Alan. Your presentation described really well the background and the setup of the project. The project is really here to support the pilot testing of the measurement of IFFs in the countries. Before we open the floor for questions and answers, we still have 2 presentations to go. After those, then we'll open the floor. And if you have any questions or remarks, you can also post them in the chat, and then we'll take them up when we have the questions and answers session. But first, let me invite Enrico Bisogno, Chief of the Data Development and Dissemination section of UNODC, to present next. He will be followed by Steve. These 2 guys will present the 2 sides of the coin, namely the concepts for measuring IFFs, first from the criminal activities side, and then from the tax and trade side. So Enrico, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Anu. I hope you can hear me well. Yeah. Thanks to you and to all participants to this conference, kickoff meeting of the project in Africa. We are happy to partner again with the UNCTAD and the ECA, also again on the issue of measurement of IFF. I try now to put some clarity on what we have been working on during the last few years. I hope you can see now. Let's see if I can also make it in a in presentation mode. Is that okay? Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, together with our friends and colleagues from UNCTAD, we have been working over the last few years to develop, a common conceptual framework for the statistical measurement of IFFs. Many of you should probably know that this term is used in many policy areas. One, we have been listening very vocally, about the issue of illicit financial flows as a tool for tax evasion or tax avoidance. But we know that IFF are very popular also in other, policy areas. For example, in the area of corruption, in the area of, because they are a tool, of course, to facilitate or commit corruption. IFF are very much also used in the framework of illegal markets. We have illicit flows when we deal with illicit goods by definition, whether this is drugs, firearms, or wildlife, or counterfeited goods. And also we have illicit financial flows in relation to financing terrorism. So you can understand when we started to work on these issues for the purpose of providing figures, measures, we had to build a framework that can put all these things, all these elements, all these perspectives together. We know that we are all working under this the framework of the umbrella of the 2030 agenda for sustainable development, where there is a specific target and a specific indicator on illicit financial flows. And this, of course, in a way, put everything together because it gives importance to all the policies that I mentioned before. And us at UNDC and colleagues at UNCTAD were identified as the ones that work on the methodology to work on this indicator. So we started this work a few years ago, as I said, and in the last October, we published at the end of a consultative and also process, but also made of actual, testing of these exercises of this, of these concepts, with a kind of definition, a broad definition of illicit financial flows for statistical purposes, and then also other things that I will tell you. But it's important that we all understand that what we are talking about. Illicit financial flows are a monetary measure of transfer, international transfer of illicitly earned capital and or legal capital transferred internationally illicitly, for illicit purposes, or original legal capital transferred illicitly. So you see, it's a money, that is moved cross-border, either because it's done legally, this cross-border transfer, or because it was originated legally, or because it's going to be used illegally. This is what we are referring to when we talk about illicit financial flows. And it's also important to keep in mind that we are always focusing on flows, not for the purpose of measurement. We try to measure flows, not stock. And then, you know, those who are familiar with statistics know that this is a very important difference to keep in mind. If this is the concept, then it's, of course, we try to identify, some key typologies of illicit financial flows, because these IFFs can be relevant, as we said, in different areas. And it's important that we are able to respond to these different policy needs in the way, so meaning that we are able to provide different disaggregated measures, statistical measures for the various types of IFFs. And there are, again, 4 main types. There are the ones related to illicit tax or commercial practices. And then Steve will later on delve into this and also try to explain the difference between illicit and illegal in this relation. And this is the work, the area where UNCTAD is leading the work. This is methodological, but also the capacity building work. While at UNODC, we are more focusing on these other types of illicit financial flows, those related to illegal markets, those related to corruption, and those related to exploitation type of illicit financial flows. So, and then just to give you a very quick description of what we mean by these 3 different illegal markets or activities. Illegal markets are the ones so in relation to illicit goods or illicit services. Now, clearly illegal goods or illegal services like drugs, firearms, illegal mining, smuggling of migrants, and so on. Wildlife. Corruption are those illicit financial flows related to these criminal, again, activities, whether it's bribery, embezzlement, and so on. And then there are some other types of illicit financial flows in relation to other crimes. So when we call them exploitation type, so there is somebody exploiting somebody else. So it can be kidnapping, it can be slavery, it can be sexual exploitation, and so on. So these are the main typologies of illicit financial flows related to criminal activities. Then again, as said, Steve will later in a few minutes talk about the ones related to tax or commercial practices. Just wanted to give you an example, just to what does it mean illicit? When do we have illicit financial flows? Because in addition to the distinction by type, there are also different stages in any kind of chain of value where we can identify illicit financial flows. For example, when we talk about, let's talk about drugs, and in a country that which is all countries in the world, because no country in the world is exempted from, unfortunately, from drug trafficking and drug consumption. We can have imports of drugs, and then in this moment, when there is an import of drugs, of course there is a corresponding illicit financial flows to, of course, to pay the drugs. This is one component, but also there is another moment where illicit financial flows are generated, because after the drugs is processed, sold at wholesale retail level, of course value is generated. Somebody is making money out of this, and in often cases this money is used and is transferred abroad for any reason. So we have again illicit financial flows. This is, of course, is very simplified description, but just to make clear that there are two different basic stages when illicit financial flows can be generated. When there is the moment of when the illegal activity is generated, so through the process of income generation, so basically export import. But also when the proceeds from crime are, invested somewhere across the border. So, and it's important this also for the policy, of course, implications, and also again for to understand how to detect and fight these two main types of illicit financial flows. This is so we have this distinction between what is done in the income generation phase and the income management phase. Typically, for example, assume a country that is trafficking drugs. When they there is some money goes abroad to buy the illicit drugs, some money to buy, and then some money goes again abroad, for example, for the investment of these crime proceeds. But of course, the destination, origin of this money can be very different, and the tools used to pay for drugs can be very different from the ones used to invest the proceeds from crime. And this is just an example for drugs, but of course, some other things similar things can be done when we talk about corruption, for example. I just wanted to show you some examples of some figures, some estimates, just to show that, as also Steve was saying at the beginning, that even if these things look very complicated, complex, it's possible. It's possible to produce estimates. Of course, some data are needed, and a good understanding of the market is needed. But again, when we have a good understanding, good data, and with good methods, we can also produce valuable estimates. This is an example from IFF in relation to opiates trafficking in Afghanistan. If we compare, for example, how much money goes out of Afghanistan. Afghanistan is the main opium producer country in the world. So, but if we compare how much money is going out from Afghanistan for agricultural products, or for some substances that are used for producing opiates, we see that, of course, much more money goes out for agricultural products. But when we compare, on the other hand, how much money goes to Afghanistan, yeah, because of this, of the sale of opiates, and we compare that with how much money goes to Afghanistan because of the sale of agricultural products, you can see the difference. No, so much more money is made in Afghanistan because of the opiate sale rather than from agricultural products. And this can explain why opium is still so popular. In production of opium is still so popular. And something similar we can say from the results of illicit financial flows pilot studies that we conducted in Mexico. And for example, in Mexico, what goes into the country because of drug trafficking, whether it's cocaine or heroin or methamphetamines, is if you can see, there is approximately the same size of what of the earnings of the income from the export of agricultural exports from Mexico, the entire agricultural exports of the country. So again, you can understand. Of course, we have while we can be extremely precise in estimating the value of agricultural exports, we cannot be as precise for estimating the value of illicit drugs exports. So this is why there is, of course, a range estimate, but you can understand, you can assess the magnitude is very similar. And again, this is something that gives us a good explanation, justification of why also the production and trafficking of illicit drugs is still very popular and difficult to eradicate. Then we have the last example on smuggling of migrants, again, Mexico. If you just focus on the two bars on the right hand, you can see that again, what smugglers of migrants, yeah, those who are organizing the traffic, earns from smuggling of migrants is the same size of what the country earns from air passenger transportation from, of course, from international tourists. So this is just to give you a very quick overview of the results of this, and to give you the feeling of the importance of these exercises, of this data, so that we are able to produce and monitor this phenomena. Well, this is what we have been doing in a project in Latin America. We are starting now a similar project also in Asia, always with UNCTAD and the Regional Commission in Asia. And we are happy to to partner with you in Africa to be able to support countries in doing similar exercises. Also, for those who are interested in the area of criminal activities in the next year or so. I will stop here. Thank you so much for your attention. Anu, the floor is over to you. Thanks again.
Thank you, Enrico. So I guess we move directly to the tax and trade side of IFFs. Steve, fire away.
Hey, well, hello everybody again. It's back to me. So let me just load up my slides. And then hopefully we should be ready. Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, so Enrico has set out the background to the project, the conceptual framework. So I'm going to spend a little time just concentrating now on the commercial or economic side. I mean, in a way, it's all economic, so commercial is probably a better word. So as Enrico explained a moment ago, there's all sorts of activities feed into this story. So ranging from corruption, illegal markets, financing terrorism, and then there's also the illicit activities that focus on commercial activities. And that tends to focus, what we're talking about here really is tax avoidance, tax evasion, and a few other practices. So if you look at the slide here, over on the left where it kind of, when the purple fades into green, this is really what we're talking about now on the UNCTAD side. So what sort of stuff are we talking about? Well, we could talk about illegal activities to do with somehow manipulating tariff duties, revenue offenses, tax evasion, competition offenses, market manipulation. And just like the work that UNODC do, this is particularly difficult to measure because it's illegal. So it's deliberately hidden. People try not to make this too obvious. But on the commercial side, we also have this trickier issue of illicit activities, which is activity that isn't explicitly illegal, but is nevertheless so aggressive that it's deemed by economists to be destructive to development finance. And what we're talking about here is extreme hiding of profits or assets through either transfer pricing, strategic location of debt or intellectual property. So this is often done through purchasing of licenses, tax treaty shopping, which is an issue that you've just heard the G7 now trying to reduce by agreeing a 15% common tax rate globally. And the use of other hybrid instruments or entities, so things like special purpose entities that are created deliberately to kind of mask ownership. So this is often buried within what's quite legal activity. And it's only illicit really as for us when it crosses the border. So again, Enrico emphasized the fact that we're interested in flows, not the stocks. So again, just to emphasize that again. Okay, so somebody else is trying to illicitly interfere with my presentation. So probably the trickiest part of the commercial side conceptually is to understand the difference between illegal and illicit. So conceptually, the easy part to understand is illegal. It's not necessarily easy to measure, but it's easier to understand, which is things like tax evasion. Whereas tax avoidance, it's not illegal, but aggressive tax avoidance can be detrimental, as I said, to sustainable development. Typically, what we're talking about here is large multinationals that are really aggressively manipulating the markets. So the first point to emphasize is that this project, we can't base it purely on legality, both because of this fuzzy concept, but also because in any event, national tax laws differ in different countries. So what do we do? So basically, if you think of a kind of a plane, on the extreme left-hand side, you have tax planning, which is perfectly normal. I mean, you and I, day to day, we plan our taxes. We try and avoid paying taxes that we shouldn't pay. And on the right-hand side, we have tax evasion, which is outright illegal manipulation of our income to deliberately fool the tax authorities. We're interested really in the space in the middle, where it hasn't yet become illegal, but the laws are being pushed to their absolute limit, so that companies can move money offshore. So some key features, and I think Enrico emphasized some of these, but no harm to go through some of them again. The idea is to measure this at country level. We're really keen to get the country experience rather than trying to come up with a global measure, because the idea of this work ultimately is that it will feed into your domestic policy and be useful to your governments. In theory, it's comprehensive, so the conceptual framework encompasses all types of illicit activities. We will not necessarily measure all of them, but at least conceptually they're all included. And crucially, what we're doing is conceptually compatible with other established concepts. In other words, what we're doing is conceptually consistent with the system of national accounts and the balance payments, and also with other work on Enrico's side on classifications and activities to do with illegal activities. So over the last couple of years, UNCTAD and UNODC have hosted a task force which has kind of developed the statistical measurement concepts, and now we've been working more recently on the actual on how to implement those concepts by developing a set of guidelines, which I think you'll hear about later on today or tomorrow. Many national statistics offices have been involved already, helping us to refine the first draft of the methodologies. And as Enrico showed you, on the illegal activities, some pilot work has already been done in Latin America. So they're in the lucky position that they've already given these concepts a test, and they already have some results. And that the project in Latin America is really important because it shows two things. One is the concepts, broadly speaking, work. And secondly, that it is possible to measure these types of activities. So, apologies for the noise, everybody. It's not me. Is there any way to mute centrally?
Can the host mute everyone, please? The host, the ECA host. Can you mute people who are not muted? You have this button and you can do it, so please do it. And en français, s'il vous plaît, ceux qui sont pas sur muet, mettez-vous sur muet, s'il vous plaît. On n'entend pas bien la présentation. Merci.
Okay, so I'm not sure what kind of activity is going on here. It sounds illicit, but I don't know. So anyhow, today, this is a very important day because today we launched the pilot projects in Africa, where we get to test in Africa for the first time the concepts and methodologies that we've developed on the commercial side. And we also get to re-implement the concepts and methodologies that have already been tested by UNODC in Latin America. And just for your information, there's also a similar project just starting with ESCAP in the Asian region. So as you've seen, we've published the conceptual framework. This conceptual framework has now been adopted by all of the regional commissions in the UN system. And it's also been adopted.
Please mute yourself, please. Let's behave. Please mute yourself. Thanks.
The conceptual framework has also been adopted by what's called FACTI, which is another big kind of global initiative looking at illicit financial flows. So we see the conceptual framework that's been developed is now disseminating and being adopted across the world, and I think that's really important. you've now volunteered to pilot this stuff, so you're involved really in a really important project, which is, I think, going to be quite groundbreaking in terms of development policy. So congratulations to all of you for getting involved. You'll hear more about the methodological guidelines in the coming hours, and then again tomorrow, which is really how we implement these high concepts. And then the idea is that once we've piloted these, we share the results between ourselves, and we also take on board the feedback. And this is the crucial point. We need to learn from your feedback, what worked and what didn't work when we actually tested this on the ground. So we've developed this conceptually, we've consulted widely, but like any plan, or in boxing parlance, that usually the plan goes out as soon as you're hit in the face. So as soon as the first punch is thrown, the plan goes out the window. So we're just about to get the first punch in the face. So when you guys start testing this for real, this is when we find out for real whether this whether these methodologies really work or not. So your work will be crucial not only for Africa, but for the entire global development system. We're focusing on national statistical offices as the focal point. Now, obviously, in every country, we want all of the different authorities to be involved, but our key liaison will be the national statistical offices. And that's primarily because we're statisticians. We have similar legal infrastructure, but it's not to say that the tax authorities, the customs authorities, the police, various other ministries and so forth will not be involved. But we're just asking the national statistical offices to take the lead. And one of the reasons as well for this is that the purposes of this project is statistical. What we're interested in is measuring illicit financial flows. We have no further administrative purpose beyond this. I mean, if states want to do something afterwards, then they'll have to organize that themselves. This is purely a measurement project. And what we're interested in testing at this stage is the soundness of the methodology, understanding the different sources of the data that you used, which sources were better than others, and then were you able to compile results? And if you were, did the results seem plausible? Did they seem to make sense to you? Then finally, we're interested also in how comparable the results will be across different countries, across different regions, because that will be extremely important when we try and aggregate up to measure the overall flows of illicit financial flows for indicator 16.4.1. And as you probably know, this last sentence is probably a bit redundant now. We're beginning the pilot projects in Africa, which is what's happening here today. And we expect that to run in the first phase, basically up until the end of the year. And with that, I'll stop just to thank again all our partners and to thank all of you guys for getting involved. We really appreciate it. And we'll do everything we can to help you achieve some good results during the pilot phase. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any questions or comments from the participants? I don't see any questions or comments in the chat. If you would like to take the floor, you could post a comment in the chat. And now I see a hand raised by Brian Astab. Please, the floor is yours. You can unmute.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Astab from Namibia. I had a question for the previous speaker, Mr. Enrico. He spoke at length about the various avenues, or not avenues rather, but the various sectors in which IFFs are predominant. But I wanted to know maybe also if he could speak as to the channels which are predominantly used in IFFs. In other words, how is IFFs, if we spoke about cross-border movement, is it physical cash? Is it through bank remittances? Is it through remittance service providers? Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on that? Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. So was it a question to Enrico?
Yes, it was.
Any other questions before we let Enrico reply to that one?
Yes, Ricardo. Yes, Mr. Ricardo, please.
Please go ahead.
Ok, muito obrigado. Daqui fala Ricardo de Angola e tenho duas questões. Uma dirigida ao Henrique e outra ao Steve. A primeira dirigida ao Henrique é que, com base no conceito que o Henrique apresentou aqui de fluxos financeiros ilícitos, a pergunta que eu coloco é: qual é a diferença deste conceito relativamente à diferença de branqueamento de capitais? É evidente que, pelo que nós entendemos, é a primeira vez, falo por mim, a ter contacto e quero parabenizar o projeto e temos também muito a contribuir com este projeto, porque o conceito parece com o conceito de branqueamento de capitais. É evidente que amanhã vamos discutir conceitos, mas a pergunta é esta, não é? Qual é a diferença? A segunda pergunta é para o Steve, que a intenção é bastante ambiciosa de tentarmos medir, não é, todos os fluxos financeiros, não é? E não terão, e vamos entender, consoante o tempo, qual foi a motivação, não é, para lançar esse projeto piloto em África. E ao lançarmos esse projeto em África, também temos outras dificuldades, porque existem dois grandes mercados, um formal e o outro informal. E ao medirmos os fluxos financeiros, não é? Teremos que medir dos dois, para podermos ter a ideia do todo, não é? É evidente que a possibilidade de medição dos fluxos, maioritariamente, como estamos aqui todos reunidos, somos todos do lado formal, não é? Não vamos para o mercado onde se vende a batata no chão, e vamos ter uma dificuldade de recolher estes dados. Também foi-se dito que vai-se recorrer aos institutos de estatísticas nacionais, mas nós temos que ter em conta também, não é, que o levantamento são fluxos financeiros, não é? E muitas das vezes cada país tem a sua estrutura, evidente, e que às vezes é mais difícil, mas os países vão se organizar dentro de si para ver como é que se vai resolver essa situação. Mas a minha pergunta para o Steve é: como é que pretende medir os fluxos financeiros do lado informal? Obrigado.
Thank you very much, Ricardo, for the question. I see Elimane Kane has a hand up. We could take this one more question and then have the first answers. Elimane?
Oui, merci beaucoup. Eliman Khan depuis Dakar, Sénégal, de think tank Lex Africa. Ma question, c'est que vous avez déjà travaillé sur une expérience sud-américaine. Est-ce que les priorités qui ont été définies pour l'expérience sud-américaine sont les mêmes pour l'Afrique? Je vois que vous insistez beaucoup sur la criminalité financière. Et est-ce que pour l'Afrique, vous avez défini des priorités différentes ou bien vous voulez travailler surtout selon le même modèle? L'autre question, c'est par rapport à, face à la difficulté de mesurer ces flux financiers sur le site, surtout ce qui concerne surtout le secret. Comment vous êtes arrivé à donc chiffrer donc ces flux-là sur la criminalité financière en Amérique du Sud? Vous avez plutôt donné des données concernant surtout la drogue comparée même au niveau des exportations agricoles. Merci. C'est deux questions donc un peu différentes.
Thank you very much. Ase, you have the floor. Ntiengui, please go ahead.
Vous pouvez parler, Monsieur Nziengi?
Oui, bonjour, je m'appelle Nzengi As-Alphonse, je suis au Gabon. Alors, j'ai été particulièrement intéressé par la démonstration qui a été faite par Steve. Alors, je voudrais savoir, parce qu'il a fait la différence entre le côté illégal et le côté illicite. Alors, chez nous en Afrique et en général, dans un contexte économique complexe, où les contrôles d'envoi d'argent échappent au pouvoir public, j'aimerais savoir, ces côtés un peu, comment dire, des envois d'argent internes ou de pays à pays, peut-on dire que c'est illicite ou illégal? Et comment faire pour pouvoir parvenir à l'échelle des choses actuelles sur ce volet qui échappe beaucoup à notre économie pour pouvoir endiguer ce phénomène? Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. I see there are also some questions in the chat. Maybe it is a good moment to ask Enrico to reply the first questions about the channels. Maybe you also want to say something about the motivations, why we want to measure IFFs and the difficulty to include the informal side. And then there was also the question whether the priorities in Africa are the same as in South America, or what are we expecting from the pilots, and how to measure financial crime. There's a lot, and there are a few more in the chat. So let's start with this, Enrico.
Thank you, Anno. Thanks for the easy questions that you asked, colleagues. You know, we are developing this work. We have been working in this area for a few years, and then it's still we are still very much in a development stage. So, for example, we are not there yet to give an answer to all the questions that we ourselves ask. Now, the challenge is a key component. Yeah, we want to know how the money is transferred. We want to understand. You know, this is definitely. I mean, it's so important also from a policy perspective, and this is the area of work is that where we are now focusing also with our colleagues at UNCTAD to understand what, to first come up with a kind of you know that we statisticians like classifications and disaggregation. So we have to. There are many different ways to transfer. You know, to make this financial transfer, whether it's cash or bank transfers, or hiding through for example, trade misinvoicing and so on. So there are a number of and then there is a lot of creativity also in this area. So this is one of the areas where we are focusing now, and this is also in the area, for example, in the collection of data and information. This is an area that we want to explore, we want to expand. And then again, we always want to recall that these are pilot projects, pilot studies. These are, we have learned something in Latin America, and then we share that knowledge with the others. We will be learning something more here in Africa, and again, we will share this knowledge with the other partners, the other countries. So this is this is one of the things we are doing now. So thanks a lot, Brian, for the question, but stay tuned. We will probably be able to contribute. And we'll be able to because the point, of course, we know that there are many different channels, but the difficult point to make is to try to identify them in an exhaustive manner, and then of course try to put numbers, to one or the other. That's which is of course, as you can understand, an estimate of how much goes through one or through the other. So as you can easily understand, this is a challenging goal. Priorities. The priority in terms of measurement, of course, is if you want that they are similar in one region or the other, because this is what we want to improve the measurement. We want to further promote, the measurement and the data that are needed. But then, of course, it's up to the countries to indicate which, if you want, which types of illicit financial flows are more relevant in one country or the other. So if a country wants to work more in a tax-related IFF or in drug trafficking-related IFFs, this is, again, up to the countries to indicate. But from our perspective, of course, the priority is to improve the measurement, both in terms of methodologies, but even more in terms of capacities. There was, how can we, a question related informal, and this is also, related to another question, how you make estimates on in a hidden phenomena. When we are talking about, in all these areas, of course, we are talking about hidden phenomena. There's no one that is telling us, reporting on a statistical form or in a administrative record, I have illegally moved this amount of money from country A to country B, and it was generated through drug trafficking or because I evaded taxes. So of course we are always in the area of estimating phenomena that are highly hidden. So what we do is to find evidence. We are a little bit like investigators. And so, for example, when we talk about drug, we do a series of data sources, whether it's sources on drug consumption, whether it's sources on drug production, or information on drug seizures, and so on. And of course, most of qualitative information from those who are experts in those areas. We try to understand what are the quantities at stake, what are the prices, the costs that are used prevalent in one country or the other for a certain type of good. So it's all based on, of course, pieces of information, oftentimes putting together information from different countries is very, extremely important. So it's important to have to be able to, if you want, triangulate information from different countries. And this is we build a consistent framework of putting together pieces from different sources and different countries. And this is also related to the question on informal, because again, this is not, of course, we are talking, especially in legal activities, there is not, we are all, by definition, we are talking about non-observed phenomena, informal / illegal phenomena. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Enrico. So then there were some other questions before we take more to, I would say, Steve, on, for instance, how do we take into account the different structures of different countries in the measurement of IFFs, the difficulties different countries might have with their data or capacity? How do we take account of the differences between the legal side of things and the illicit side? And are IFFs already being compiled in some countries, and is there a manual or guide for the compilation? So Steve, maybe you can address some of these.
Okay, everybody, so thank you for the questions. So, Elimine, s'il vous plaît, je parle en anglais. For the priorities, just to explain again, to re-emphasize what Enrico just said, the conceptual framework is comprehensive. So it deals with all of the different illicit financial flows that we're aware of. We expect different regions to focus on different types. So for example, in Africa, we would expect a lot of activity to focus on commodities. So in particular, maybe trade misinvoicing might be more important in Africa than it has been in other regions. But that's not to say that's the exclusive focus. So the first point is it's up to countries to prioritize which illicit financial flows you want to concentrate on. Having said that, we would expect different regions maybe to focus on different things. But we don't know. That's our expectation. Only time will tell. Ricardo asked a question about informal versus formal, which is a very important point. So what I would say there is, first thing, we're interested in cross-border flows. So we need to make the distinction between domestic and international, if you want to call it that, the difference between those illicit financial flows. While domestic illicit activities may be very important, that's not what we're attempting to measure. We're really going to concentrate on cross-border flows. And because of that, we expect it to be more in the formal economy than the informal. That's not to say that informal don't move goods or money across borders, but that tends to be illegal. On the commercial side, we expect it to be the formal economy that's misbehaving or pushing the limits. So that's the distinction, if that makes sense. Then Hasse, he asked about the difference between illegal and illicit. Well, this is where it gets complicated, because finance that's been raised from a legal activity can then be moved abroad using illicit or illegal channels. Money that's been raised from illegal activities can then be moved abroad using illicit or illegal channels, or legal. So in other words, it can be laundered. So you've all of these different combinations. What we're primarily interested in, and that's why we tend not to focus on the commercial side on legal versus illegal. We tend to focus on the activities. So when we get to the methodological guidelines, you'll see a suite of activities that we intend to pilot, and that's maybe the better way to focus on it. And I think that might answer the last question that Anu put to me. Yeah, there are guidelines coming. We haven't presented them yet. What we're trying to do is, at the moment, is present the overall framework. Then after that, we'll move down into the more nitty-gritty, where we present a set of different methodological guidelines which test different elements of illicit financial flows. Because as I mentioned in my presentation, there isn't one type of illicit financial flow, there's several, and we have to try and test as many as we can. So I'll stop there. I don't know if I've answered all of the questions.
Are some countries already compiling estimates of IFFs? I guess yes, some countries are compiling estimates of IFFs. Actually, several countries, and currently we're taking stock of that. Of course, the Latin American countries have compiled estimates from the crime side of IFFs. Several countries have done something related to trade misinvoicing, and the Brazilians, for instance, have been active in estimating IFFs related to profit shifting and trade misinvoicing. So there are several examples, and we'll be able to share these country examples with you when we progress with the pilots. Maybe that's what we can say. Steve, you're muted.
I think there's a question from Silvestre too, which I'll just say something quickly, which is about how is it possible to make the assessment of illicit financial flows looking at undervaluation or overvaluation of prices from imports or exports where multinationals are involved. So I don't want to ruin the surprise, but that's one of the methodologies that you'll be testing if you're interested, if your country is interested in that area. We have methodologies designed to address that exact question, both looking at transfer pricing and other types of activities that involve maybe, well, the polite term is intra-company pricing, which often don't bear any relationship to market prices. Back to you, Anna.
Thank you, Steve. Susan has been kind enough to keep track of who wants to speak. If I'm right, at one point, Nilton Shuck wanted to have the floor. Have you already posed your question, Nilton, or would you like to take the floor now? Maybe it's, yeah, Nilton.
Muito boa tarde a todos. Bom, talvez para alguns está ainda é dia, mas aqui nós já estamos no início da tarde. Antes de felicitar as apresentações, foram apresentações bastante valiosas em termos de conteúdo e oxalá que este projeto tenha tanto o encaminhamento devido nos próximos meses. A questão que eu queria colocar, se calhar já tinha sido colocada por um outro colega, talvez fosse o caso de reforçar. O fato é que os países africanos, em particular os que pude ver que foram selecionados para este projeto piloto, são bastante homogéneos. E então, como é que decidimos por qual tipo de IFF vamos medir? Se calhar para Moçambique interessa o IFF, fluxos financeiros ilícitos relacionados com tráfico, por exemplo, de recursos minerais, ou se calhar interessa produtos da flora e da floresta, e não necessariamente comércio, mas se calhar para Angola ou Namíbia interessa um outro tipo de elementos de medição. Então, gostava de saber se existe um trabalho a priori, ou vamos ter que decidir nós próprios qual é que vai ser a nossa prioridade, e desde que sejam dados os instrumentos para isso. O segundo aspecto, que também foi colocado, tem a ver com que queremos medir fluxos de dentro para fora, mas também, se calhar, existem atividades ilícitas internamente, então, entre agentes residentes. Se calhar também seja importante ver se é possível estabelecermos metodologias que podemos chegar a uma medida deste tipo. Como falou um dos apresentadores, que neste momento o interesse deste projeto é numa relação de dentro e fora, portanto, entre países. Mas se calhar podemos pensar, talvez neste momento ou no futuro, em medidas de transações ilícitas internamente, entre agentes residentes, é o que eu quero dizer. E por fim, há uma intervenção que eu vi aqui no chat que se calhar valia a pena reforçar, que tem a ver com se podemos incorporar estas medidas no contexto de contas nacionais. Se reparar, se queremos medir transações entre países ilícitas ou não, essas devem ser também, portanto, contabilizadas na estrutura, portanto, do sistema econômico, por forma, se calhar, a melhor fazermos a contabilidade das nossas economias por via de transações que existem, portanto, embora sendo ilícitas. Obrigado.
Thank you, Nilton. You raised really central questions. Before we embark on answering those, let's see if Jean Mbala has additional questions. Jean, the floor is yours.
Bonjour à tous. Je suis Jean Mbala du Cameroun. Merci pour les présentations que nous avons suivies en amont de cette discussion. J'ai une question en rapport avec illicite, les flux financiers illicites et le commerce international. Yeah. Nous avons réalisé au Cameroun une étude de référence sur la mesure des flux financiers illicites dans les commerces internationaux. Nous avons utilisé essentiellement, disons, que la méthode de données miroirs. Yeah. Et nous avons constaté que le système national d'information des statistiques a des disparités et qu'il y a une asymétrie d'information en ce qui concerne les déclarations sur des données du commerce international en rapport avec d'autres bases de données que nous avons consultées. Et nous nous rendons compte qu'il y a véritablement un problème d'organisation et de capacité au niveau du système national des statistiques. Oui. Au-delà des pratiques commerciales que l'on peut constater et qui peuvent induire les flux financiers illicites, est-ce que le projet dans sa phase, que ce soit pilote ou par extension, prévoit des accompagnements pour le renforcement des capacités des systèmes statistiques nationaux? Ça, c'est ma question. Et on pourrait éventuellement voir si le Cameroun est définitivement admis comme pays dans la phase pilote, si on pourra en bénéficier. Oui, voilà, je suis là. Merci.
Thank you very much. And then we have one more question from Ibi Nabo. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for the presentation and for the insight. What I needed to ask or know further is the fact that there's already a project or a report on IFF, which was done by the high-level panel headed by former President of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki. So I need to know, this current project, will it be totally different from that? Is there going to be any kind of harmonization? Because in that particular report, it took a synopsis, there was a synopsis of every country, African countries, and the kind of IFF that actually is perpetuated from those countries, as much as even the value was stated. And so I just want to know the methodology that this project will come up with, if it's going to be different from what they adopted or what the new thing. Hello?
Yes.
Did you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
Was that, did you manage to finish? I think so.
Yes, yes.
Great. Thank you for the questions. Are there any volunteers to answer? I can take up the question also on the System of National Accounts and Balance of Payments update that is currently being prepared. And are we going to be aligned with the System of National Accounts and the Balance of Payments? Are we going to be able to incorporate the measurement of IFFs in the national accounts context? So that was an additional question in the chat. So Steve wants to start.
Yeah, thank you. So let me start with the last question about the Mbeki report. So it's a very important question. So the Mbeki report focused primarily on trade misinvoicing, which is one dimension of illicit financial flows, but it's not by any stretch of the imagination the only type. So the difference between the Mbeki report and this conceptually is that this is looking at a much broader set of illicit financial flows, not just trade misinvoicing. And then that leads to the previous question where the gentleman was asking about the difficulties of using the trade data. One of the challenges that we've seen with the exercises so far on trade misinvoicing is the confusion between trade misinvoicing and trade asymmetries. And in the statistical framework, there's a number of asymmetries, if you want, inbuilt into the data, not least how the flows are priced. So in other words, some are priced in what's called SIF, some are priced in FOB. And in fact, in the new recommendations that will come out, the new trade recommendations that will feed into the new SNA in 2025, it's expected that we'll get rid of that distinction and will price all data sets on the same basis. But for the moment, there's issues like that. And one of the challenges with the trade misinvoicing work that's been done is those asymmetries haven't filtered out basic statistical kind of mispricing and anomalies. And we believe that the risk has been is that they've overpriced or they've overvalued trade misinvoicing. So that I think that also speaks to the issue about the trade data set. So in the guidelines that we'll talk about later, we'll talk about some of the issues that statisticians need to take into account when they're looking at trade asymmetries before they can kind of decide, well, in all probability, that's misinvoicing. To build on what Anu just said, so yeah, so the process to begin the revisions of the SNA and the balance payments manuals has begun. But that's quite a long process. So we don't expect to see any recommendations on a new SNA until about 2025. So for the moment, it's not something we need to worry about. I mean, we'll be liaising with the Secretariat in New York to understand what they're doing. But for the moment, the pilots will be done based on the Balance Payments Manual number 6 and the 2008 SNA. As they develop, we'll see. And in fact, they may have some changes because we certainly expect some developments on intangible goods, and that may well affect things like licenses and so forth. So that may have an effect in the future. But for the moment, we work with the existing guidelines and then we'll modify as necessary. And then I think it was Mozambique asked about prioritization. So what I would say is we haven't provided any tools to help you prioritize. I think it's really what we're hoping is that countries will prioritize based on their national knowledge. So that I would imagine they would prioritize based on national priorities. And also because they'll have a much better handle on what data are available and the quality of those data. So from a policy point of view, you should be better able to prioritize than us. And from a pragmatic perspective, I think you'll have a better grasp of which data are robust and which data are less robust, and maybe where there's access issues, where there aren't access issues. And that may also filter into the decision-making matrix that you use. So I'll stop there, Anu.
There was also a question about domestic side of illicit finance and whether we should come up with methods to measure that.
So yeah, this is a really important question. So what I would say, and it comes back to the point the speaker made earlier about the distinction between formal and informal. The genesis of this project is the Sustainable Development Goals. And in that context, we're interested in international flows, so cross-border flows. But in fact, when we've been liaising with the regional commissions, they have raised the issue of domestic illicit financial flows as well. So it's on our radar as something for the future, but it's not our immediate priority. I think what we should do is focus on the international flows first, because we'll learn a lot of lessons from that. Because the domestic one is actually going to be much more complex because it doesn't cross borders. There's going to be less data available to begin with. And then we'll also have the muddier waters of trying to tease out or detect the informal activity, which in and of itself is much more complicated. So I think we should start with what we can do, and we should try and walk before we start running. And yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Thank you. Did Enrico have something to add to this, or is it fine? Or Alan?
It's thank you, and thank you, Anna. Just okay, just one thing, because
Enrico, we can't hear you.
Sorry.
Looks like you are not muted, but still we can't hear you. If you can try unmute somehow.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
No.
No, that's strange.
I can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you. I can hear
Okay.
you. I can hear you.
It seems that everybody can hear me, but you, Anu. Okay. Okay. So it's only one point, because Steve already answered to most of the to all the questions. One thing which is specific, but this is specific to kind of criminal activities. So illegal, those activities that refer to illegal goods or illegal services. For those, of course, if you think whether it's we are talking about drug trafficking or wildlife, or even illegal mining or logging, there is always a component, also domestic component in the value chain, of that good, because usually before something goes from the production or the trade to the consumption, there is always a domestic value chain. So to be able to estimate the overall income generated by, again, a certain specific illegal market, there is also of course the need of estimating the domestic component. So for that, the part of illegal markets, we are, I mean, the estimation procedure also requires, of course, when this is possible in terms of data availability, also it requires the offers the possibility to also to estimate the domestic dimension of the market, which is so that to understand how much value is generated in country A or B in relation to a certain illegal goods. But this, again, this is specific to illegal activities, especially illegal goods and illegal markets, whether they are goods or services, which is a bit different from what in this respect with what is the work on IFF related to tax and tax practices. So this is one additional output, if you want. Also, the provision of the data also on the domestic market. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Enrico. I managed to hear the end of your intervention, so apologies if I repeat anything. I guess it's time to wrap up the first session and have a small break after. But let me just do a small recap of the session. So why UNCTAD, UNODC and ECA are active in measuring IFFs is because UNCTAD and UNODC have been asked by the UN General Assembly to be the custodians of SDG indicators 1641 on IFFs and lead the methodological work. UNECA is leading the work in Africa. So under their umbrella, where we're working together with you on the pilots. We have an international statistical task force working on the statistical measurement of IFFs and overseeing the methodology refinement and eagerly awaiting for results from the pilots from different countries. And then the intention is to refine the methodologies. But in fact, the basic methodologies have been approved by their interagency and expert group on SDG indicators and the UN Statistical Commission. So this is the basis on which we work further. We have a conceptual framework covering all types of IFFs, but the intention of the pilots really is to review the IFFs that are most prominent in the country in that context, to have an assessment of the data that is available in the country and to assess the statistical capacity of the country to measure illicit financial flows. For these steps, we will have tools, and we will tell you more about these in the next sessions of the workshop in the course of these 2 days, so that you will know more what the expectations are and how we can help you with the tools that we have developed. The methodological guidelines will be shortly available, and we will talk to you more about the methods. And yes, definitely the intention is to help countries build their own statistical capacity so that they can be empowered to measure illicit financial flows and inform the national policy according to the priorities in each country. This could mean that the pilot country selects only 1 or 2 types of IFFs to measure those IFFs that are most prominent, where data exists, where measurement is possible. So with this, I'm wrapping up the first session. Look forward to the next sessions and to hearing from pilot countries on your experience to date. I don't know if Alan is online. If you want to say anything before we break, and when do we start again? We've used up most of our break. I guess according to the agenda, we will start the next session in about 5 minutes time. Thank you very much. Just a 5-minute break and we will continue.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Enrico.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Welcome back from that break. We will be resuming shortly. I hope that those who had taken a break are back. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Anu. And thank you, Enrico, for the first session and for the presentations. We will be shortly moving on to the country experience sharing. Are we all back? Are we all back to the meeting?
Yes, we are here, it looks like.
All right, thank you very much. We would like to start the country presentations. please make sure that you have your interpretations icon turned on, because countries will be presenting in different languages. So the lineup is as this. We will start with Angola. This will be followed by Benin. And then we'll have another set of countries, another round. I'd like to welcome Mr. Ricardo Jao. He's the head of the Financial Information Unit from the government of Angola. Mr. Ricardo, you're welcome. Kindly introduce yourself and then start with your presentation. If you need help with sharing the screen, please let us know. Thank you.
Ok, muito obrigado. Conforme já disse, eu sou o Ricardo João e sou chefe de um departamento da Unidade de Informação Financeira Angolana. E antes de começar, quero perguntar se a apresentação será feita, a apresentação do slide será feito aquele que nós enviamos, eu é que tenho que partilhar. Eu posso partilhar, não é? Alô?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you very much. Please proceed. My colleague Douglas, are you able to share the screen for the presentation from Angola? Hello, Douglas. Yes, we will be sharing shortly.
Okay.
Yes, here it is. Proceed, please.
Ok, muito obrigado. Conforme ele pode puxar, não é? Eu estou a falar, pode mudar de slide, ou eu posso também fazer o manuseio do slide. Ok, a nossa abordagem aqui, que nós nos propusemos a falar, nós seguimos o roteiro que a organização, a UNAC, nos enviou, não é? E tendo em conta todos os subsídios que aqui foram apresentados, o que nós pretendemos espelhar é que Angola, a nível indicativo, tem feito para combater ou prevenir esses fluxos financeiros ilícitos. E nós, Angola, conforme é um país que está situado na parte ocidental de África, nós estamos integrados na região da SADC, e a nosso nível, como é que Angola tem combatido esses fluxos financeiros ilícitos, não é? Nós preferimos, pode mudar de slide, nós preferimos estruturar a abordagem da seguinte forma, não é? Existe um conjunto de instituições em Angola que formam um sistema de prevenção e combate ao branqueamento de capitais, onde integram um conjunto de instituições públicas e privadas que fazem o controlo desses fluxos ou parte dos fluxos financeiros ilícitos. E respondemos assim à primeira pergunta. Por quê? Porque em Angola temos uma estrutura em que tem um conjunto de instituições como a Procuradoria-Geral da República, a Polícia de Investigação Criminal, a Unidade de Informação Financeira, a Autoridade Tributária, um conjunto de outras instituições públicas, não é? Acrescido de um conjunto de supervisores, não é? Bancários, supervisores de seguros, supervisores dos valores mobiliários, supervisores dos jogos, dos diamantes, portanto, e dos supervisores dos advogados, dos contabilistas e, consequentemente, um conjunto de outras instituições como os bancos, as seguradoras, as instituições, os brokers de valores mobiliários, os casinos, os advogados, os contabilistas, os notários. Portanto, todas essas instituições formam uma estrutura de instituições que são responsáveis para monitorizar os fluxos financeiros, maioritariamente dinheiro, não é? Porque podem ser os outros fluxos financeiros de outros commodities, para monitorizar esses fluxos financeiros, e esses fluxos financeiros, nessa monitorização, aparecem um conjunto de fluxos financeiros ilícitos. E o nosso objetivo nesta abordagem inicial, piloto, como se diz, é medir esses fluxos financeiros ilícitos por meio de um conjunto de técnicas e metodologias estatísticas para aferir se esses fluxos financeiros são muitos, aferir em termos de valores, em termos de dinheiro ou em termos qualitativos, em termos do tipo de fluxos financeiros que estão envolvidos. Portanto, então é esta a nossa abordagem, ou seja, nós temos um conjunto de instituições que eu acabei de dizer que monitoriza esses fluxos financeiros. Essas instituições, elas agem por meio de um conjunto de leis que legitima essas instituições a fazerem essa monitorização desses fluxos financeiros e, consequentemente, os fluxos financeiros ilícitos que também aparecem na relação entre um conjunto de instituições privadas e os seus clientes, porque é aí onde, conforme já se foi esclarecido, onde é possível, inicialmente é possível no setor mais formal, para identificar esses fluxos financeiros ilícitos. Portanto, e a pergunta também é quais são, não é? Que tipo de projetos que Angola tem onde é possível analisar que está-se a monitorizar esses fluxos financeiros, ou que tipo de projetos nacionais. E há um conjunto de projetos nacionais onde há a monitorização de uma boa parte dos tipos de fluxos financeiros. O primeiro, não é? O projeto é a própria avaliação mútua em termos de combate ao branqueamento de capitais, o que permite ser muito abrangente, porque não só inclui ativos financeiros ilícitos provenientes do crime de branqueamento de capitais, mas de um conjunto de outras fontes de crimes, como o crime da corrupção, como o crime do peculato, como o crime do roubo, do furto, portanto, de outros crimes que são possíveis nós monitorizarmos esses fluxos financeiros. Também falo outro projeto e processo que acontece a nível da Angola, que é a própria avaliação do sistema de prevenção, do sistema contra a corrupção, não é? Também está-se a fazer, e aí também é possível, conforme no outro processo, e neste processo é possível recolher um conjunto de dados onde é possível fazer essa medição a nível indicativo, não é? Porque não é possível todo, não é? Pelo menos para já, a nível indicativo, essa medição dos fluxos financeiros ilícitos. Também temos um processo que também ajuda, que é de avaliação nacional do risco relativamente ao crime de branqueamento de capitais, financiamento do terrorismo e armas de destruição em massa. Nesta ordem de ideias, também é possível, neste processo, fazer permite, nós priorizamos, a nível do risco, permite dar prioridade de que tipos de fluxos financeiros nós podemos analisar, não é? E podemos medir por causa do seu nível de risco maior e dano que pode trazer à nossa economia. Portanto, nós também, mas a nível mais específico, não é? Internamente, e é o slide que está a apresentar, existe um grupo nacional de coordenação de combate, de combate a um conjunto de crimes financeiros, onde é possível identificar um conjunto de fluxos financeiros e também é possível medir, também a nível indicativo, com registros do dinheiro envolvido nesses crimes, portanto, nessa recolha desses dados, é possível medir e projetar de modo estatístico um conjunto de fluxos financeiros, um conjunto de tipos de fluxos financeiros a partir deste grupo. Também temos outro projeto e processo interno, que é um conjunto de casos que está a ser executados a nível interno de recuperação de ativos, ou seja, a partir de um processo inicialmente de suspeita de crimes e de conclusões mais a nível mais introdutório e administrativo de não justificação de aquisição de um conjunto de bens por meio lícito, como não justifica-se, não é? Há realmente esta perspectiva de recuperação de ativos. Também há projetos e situações pontuais onde há grupos interministeriais que combatem
Mr. Ricardo, could you be winding down soon, please?
Já estou no fim. Onde há possibilidade de combater a troca de dinheiro no mercado informal. Portanto, pode mudar. Para já, nesse âmbito, é possível, daí recolhemos um conjunto de dados onde é possível medir quantitativamente, em termos de dinheiro, os fluxos financeiros ilícitos. Portanto, essa experiência que nós temos a partilhar com os países, é evidente que há muito mais dados que, no decorrer desse processo, será possível a nossa partilha. Muito obrigado pela atenção.
Muito obrigado. You have given us quite a good experience of what actually is taking place in Angola. And I can see why the chat rooms are asking for us to share the presentations with everybody. And I think that is the spirit. Let us get the presentations. We shall put them on the website and everybody can have access to them to function in two ways. One, exchange information, but two, to follow up on any leads that kind of cross-fertilize people's thinking, going forward. So allow me now to ask someone from Benin to prepare to make a presentation. In the meantime, allow me to apologize for joining late because I was logged out and I was trying to log in and I somehow delayed in logging in. So someone from Benin? We have a presenter from Benin. Is it
Oui,
Moffat?
oui, bonjour.
Bonjour.
À tous, j'essaie de partager mon écran avant de me présenter. Alors, je ne sais pas si l'écran est partagé.
Yes.
Oui,
Yeah,
on peut voir votre écran, ouais.
We can see the presentation.
Très bien, l'écran est partagé. Merci.
Merci beaucoup. Alors, moi, je suis Serge Kouidanou. Je suis le secrétaire général de la CENTIF du Bénin. La CENTIF, c'est la cellule de renseignement financier au Bénin. Je remercie d'abord les organisateurs et je salue le projet de mesure des flux financiers illicites en Afrique qui revêt pour nous autres pays africains une importance capitale. Tout le monde sait que les estimations disponibles montrent que l'Afrique, il y sort chaque année des centaines de milliards de dollars en termes de flux financiers illicites provenant de toutes sortes d'activités illégales, illicites ou même criminelles. C'est dans ce cadre que, en tant que pays pilote, nous y attachons beaucoup d'intérêt. En effet, le Bénin dispose certainement d'une structure de lutte contre ces flux, je vais vous le présenter tout à l'heure, mais n'a pas encore un dispositif de mesure pertinente de l'ensemble de ces flux afin de les évaluer et de prendre des mesures drastiques véritablement pour faire face à ce problème. Mais déjà, qui sont ceux qui sont concernés au Bénin par les flux financiers, les acteurs essentiels? Bien entendu, nous avons la CENTIF, mais nous avons aussi le Haut Commissariat de la prévention de la corruption, qui est un organe nouvellement créé, qui vient remplacer une autre institution appelée en son temps Autorité nationale de lutte contre la corruption. Après une étude, une évaluation, le gouvernement actuel du Bénin, qui est un gouvernement qui s'affiche très clairement dans la lutte pour la bonne gouvernance, la lutte contre la corruption et toutes les autres formes de crimes économiques et financiers, a donc choisi de renforcer la lutte contre la corruption en créant un haut commissariat à qui des prérogatives beaucoup plus importantes ont été données pour pérenniser dans l'administration publique un système d'intégrité. Ensuite, le gouvernement a procédé également à une réforme visant à renforcer les attributions de la cellule de renseignement financier parce que justement, le gouvernement a placé au centre de la lutte contre les flux financiers illicites la problématique de la lutte contre le blanchiment de capitaux et le financement du terrorisme. En effet, toutes les sources, sinon tous les flux financiers illicites, comme nous l'avons vu dans les présentations de ce matin, et je remercie au passage les présentateurs, nous avons vu que l'ensemble de ces flux se convertissent d'une manière ou d'une autre dans le circuit formel financier ou bancaire, de sorte que vous ne pouvez pas lutter efficacement contre les flux financiers illicites sans combattre le blanchiment de capitaux et le financement du terrorisme. Nous avons également vu que ces flux alimentent beaucoup d'insécurité, surtout dans notre zone. Le Bénin se situe au sud du Sahara et vous connaissez les problèmes de terrorisme et de son financement auxquels nos pays sont donc confrontés. Et donc, cette problématique pour le gouvernement l'a amené à renforcer véritablement les prérogatives de la cellule de renseignement. Mais en même temps, le gouvernement a créé, à côté, bien entendu, de la Direction générale des impôts, de la Direction des douanes, qui sont des services centraux de l'État qui s'occupent de la lutte contre les flux financiers illicites, chacun dans son domaine, le gouvernement a créé une cour spécialisée en matière d'infractions économiques et financières, la CRIET, pour poursuivre, juger, condamner tous les auteurs de crimes économiques et financiers, et donc tous les auteurs de flux financiers illicites. Cette cour-là fait beaucoup parler d'elle et instaure dans l'esprit du Béninois aujourd'hui le respect de la chose publique. Je n'ai pas voulu faire la présentation des infractions dominantes et productrices de flux financiers illicites chez nous, mais notre situation n'est pas différente des autres pays. C'est la corruption, c'est le détournement des biens publics, c'est la fraude fiscale, c'est la contrebande, et vous pouvez ajouter les autres trafics, mais essentiellement ce qui pollue l'économie et asphyxie l'économie, généralement en Afrique, c'est essentiellement la corruption sous toutes ses formes et ensuite les fraudes. Et donc aujourd'hui, dans le subconscient des Béninois, la peur d'être réprimé, d'être donc présenté à la criette fait que les cadres béninois commencent par devenir des cadres vertueux. Et donc, je souligne que la création de cette cour a été une avancée énorme dans la lutte donc contre les flux financiers illicites et les infractions économiques financières de façon générale. Ensuite, nous avons compris que, et vous l'avez dit le matin, les flux financiers illicites ont forcément une dimension transnationale. Et donc, vous ne pouvez pas, au plan national, être efficace en vous basant simplement sur votre arsenal juridique institutionnel. Il est essentiel de s'inscrire véritablement dans une coopération internationale dynamique. C'est pour ça que le Bénin a encouragé son CF non seulement à adhérer au groupe Egmont, mais en même temps, le Bénin a adhéré au Forum mondial de la transparence sur la transparence fiscale pour faciliter l'échange de renseignements, parce que les enquêtes financières dans ce domaine se nourrissent essentiellement de renseignements financiers, tant au plan interne, au plan international, et surtout lorsque vous entrez dans une politique de confiscation, parce que la CRIET aujourd'hui non seulement condamne, mais fait tout pour démasquer, identifier et confisquer les avoirs issus de ces flux financiers illicites. Et donc, la coopération dans ce domaine, l'entrée judiciaire devient une priorité, de sorte que nos organes, nos institutions au plan national déjà sont dans une dynamique de coopération, mais en même temps, à l'international, nous essayons de signer assez d'accords, de protocoles pour pouvoir véritablement faire aboutir les enquêtes lorsque justement les flux financiers sont logés hors de notre juridiction. Et à côté de tout ça, le gouvernement a pris plusieurs réformes de modernisation de l'administration publique. Effectivement, notre économie est à dominance informelle et les questions qui ont eu trait à ce secteur informel m'ont beaucoup intéressé, en ce sens que en Afrique, notre grand mal, c'est le défaut des statistiques. C'est la qui ne permet pas d'appréhender l'ampleur véritablement d'un phénomène. Et en l'occurrence ici, nous ne pouvons pas, nous avons des estimations certainement, mais nous ne pouvons pas vous dire avec précision le dégât que causent les flux financiers illicites à l'économie béninoise. Et donc, le gouvernement a entrepris des réformes de modernisation pour limiter justement l'utilisation de l'espèce dans les échanges financiers, dans les opérations commerciales, surtout en relation avec l'État, dans les marchés publics et autres. Et donc, il y a beaucoup de services de dématérialisation qui aujourd'hui contribuent à renforcer l'intégrité, la sûreté des opérations financières de l'État et de ses relations avec l'ensemble des agents économiques, les personnes morales et également physiques. L'idée de ces réformes étant de mobiliser la recette interne, la recette intérieure, éviter leur dispersion à travers la corruption, le détournement, le gaspillage et la mauvaise gouvernance. Donc, très rapidement, c'est la philosophie qui entoure l'ensemble de ces réformes qui impactent tous les secteurs économiques et tous les domaines. Voilà globalement pour gérer le temps ce que j'allais dire et dire que tout ceci ne peut être possible que lorsque une volonté politique affichée en est le moteur. Et au Bénin, nous avons la chance que clairement afficher cette volonté permet véritablement à nous autres acteurs d'être indépendants, parce qu'il s'agit là d'être véritablement indépendants pour pouvoir mener ces actions de lutte contre les flux financiers illicites. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Son Excellence Serge, for this sharing on the situation in Benin. And I was going to go alphabetically. I would have moved to Cameroon, but I haven't yet identified someone from Cameroon. So in the meantime, let me look to Mozambique, ask someone from Mozambique to do a presentation while I try to identify if there is someone else from Cameroon who could speak on behalf of Cameroon. I'd love to now ask the representative from Mozambique. Could you please upload your presentation and make the presentation? Is that Milton?
Muito boa tarde mais uma vez.
Boa tarde.
Espero
Milton.
que estejam a conseguir ouvir-me com perfeição. Portanto, a apresentação é em português. Em relação a esse tema, bom, nós estamos no Instituto Nacional de Estatística, mas temos outros colegas que estão em outros pontos, concretamente do Banco Central, da Autoridade Tributária e do Ministério das Finanças, os quais endereço os meus cumprimentos desde já. Bom, indo direto para a apresentação, começar por dizer o seguinte. O tema dos fluxos financeiros ilícitos não é novo no país, mas a falta de dados oficiais sobre o assunto, tanto de produção nacional, faz com que a procura sobre deste produto e o debate sobre os mesmos seja ausente no contexto nacional. Entretanto, dizer que não existem ainda iniciativas e estratégias nesse sentido, a nível, sobretudo, do Instituto Nacional de Estatística, e o principal desafio neste momento, tanto para a medição dos fluxos financeiros ilícitos, será de natureza técnica, portanto, uma necessidade de capacitação técnica nesse domínio, tanto em termos de metodologias, quais são os dados que vamos recolher, qual é a área em que vamos considerar como prioritária e por aí fora. Mas é basicamente de natureza técnica nosso desafio no momento para fazer esta medição dos fluxos financeiros ilícitos. Entretanto, no atual contexto que o país se encontra, pode ser de interesse nacional medir fluxos financeiros relacionados com impostos, portanto, a questão da evasão fiscal, portanto, no comércio internacional. Estamos agora num processo, num momento de emergência do setor da indústria extrativa e, portanto, também seria interessante medir fluxos financeiros específicos da indústria extrativa para commodities como minerais metálicos, pedras preciosas, gás e petróleo. E também, portanto, ainda sobre os diferentes tipos de fluxos, também há a realçar, portanto, a necessidade de medir transações relacionadas com mobile banking, que é uma área que tem estado a merecer muita atenção e muita aderência por parte dos cidadãos moçambicanos, e também há muitas questões que são levantadas sobre transações ilícitas, portanto, por via dessas plataformas, que também seria interessante fazer uma introspecção nesse domínio. Um outro domínio também não menos relevante é a questão do terrorismo e da corrupção e de transações, portanto, ilegais, portanto, envolvendo recursos naturais, portanto, já me referi a pedras preciosas e produtos de fauna e bravia. Portanto, são aspectos que devem ser levados com alguma atenção particular, tendo em conta, portanto, os aspectos que me referi de invasão fiscal e comercial. Em termos de instituições, várias instituições parceiras do Instituto Nacional de Estatística, como o caso do Banco de Moçambique, a Autoridade Tributária, a Direção Nacional das Alfândegas, o Ministério de Economia e Finanças, as câmaras de comércio, o Ministério da Indústria e Comércio, tanto o Ministério da Agricultura, o Ministério de Recursos Minerais, entre outros, a Procuradoria-Geral, o Gabinete de Anticorrupção, o Gabinete de Informação Financeira do Estado, portanto, podem ser úteis em termos de disponibilidade de dados e informações relevantes para esse efeito e que têm registros, obviamente, relativamente regulares. Só para dar um exemplo, tanto para o caso do Banco de Moçambique, tanto transações sobre transferências de entidades singulares ou coletivas para o exterior, tanto que são captados pela balança de pagamentos, podem ser úteis para fazer algum confronto, tanto nas relações bilaterais, tanto entre países, idem para transações comerciais, tanto de Moçambique e os principais parceiros comerciais, portanto, o confronto entre essas informações pode trazer uma luz de onde é que está a haver alguma situação portanto, que é possível captar um fluxo ilícito. E para concluir, tanto assumimos o cometimento como moçambicanos, como o Instituto Nacional de Estatística, de trabalhar em conjunto para o sucesso deste projeto, portanto, e felicitar também a organização, portanto, a UNECA e as organizações parceiras responsáveis por organizar essa iniciativa. E como disse no princípio, contamos com suporte técnico e com maior incidência para orientação sobre conceitos, métodos e etapas necessárias para melhor compilar dados e mensuração dos fluxos financeiros ilícitos em Moçambique, em particular, e para os países de África no geral. E só uma nota adicional, é referir que em termos de estudos disponíveis sobre os fluxos financeiros ilícitos sobre Moçambique, tanto em particular, existem 2 que merecem destaque, que vale a pena revisitá-los para efeitos de familiarização. Um deles é da Global Financial Integrity, de 2019, que calcula tanto os fluxos para um conjunto de 148 países em vias de desenvolvimento, dos quais 45 são países da África subsaariana. Portanto, este é um estudo que apresenta um conjunto de recomendações válidas no contexto dos fluxos financeiros ilícitos que merece atenção. O outro é da UNECA, da União Africana, de 2015, que foi feita referência aqui, que é do painel de alto nível sobre fluxos financeiros, também tem um conjunto de recomendações válidas. Portanto, seria útil para os participantes e para quem quiser revisitar esses documentos, se for o caso eu posso partilhá-los, que é para efeitos de familiarização. E para concluir, como foi dito pelos oradores no início desta sessão, que o mais importante é que as medidas devem refletir as necessidades nacionais e que estas nos permitam tecer recomendações válidas e medidas de política factíveis para erradicar este mal, que traz consigo consequências negativas para as economias e para a sociedade no geral. E muito obrigado, e eu vou parar por aqui.
Muito obrigado, muito obrigado.
Não sei se conseguiram ouvir-me, eu já terminei a apresentação.
No, we have followed. At least from my end, I have followed very closely. Thank you very much for the rich sharing. And this sets us very well to go to the other side of the continent. From the eastern to the western side of the continent, can we now move to Namibia? Can we move to Namibia? Who is presenting from Namibia?
Good afternoon. My colleague Penelau will be presenting Namibia.
Penelau. Welcome, Penelau. Over to you. You can share your screen, and we're all ears for you now.
Okay. Good afternoon. I hope you'll be able to see my screen very soon. I'm from Bank of Namibia, together with Mr. Brian Aseb, who just spoke now. We are also joined by our colleagues from the Financial Intelligence Center, our research department, which is responsible for balance of payment statistics. And also, Namibia has launched the Namibia Revenue Agency during April, and the colleagues are also with us, and we are also braced by the presence of our other CMA colleagues from South Africa, Lesotho, and Eswatini. We had the invitation to the Namibia Statistics Agency, but we are not very sure they are with us. So thank you very much. So in terms of our presentation, it also follows the rest of the colleagues that have presented much earlier. It's centered around the three questions. So in terms of the first item there, the agencies that are dealing with the illicit financial flows, you have the Bank of Namibia there, and we are also supported by our colleagues from the research department, and their data is also supported by the work of our customs and also the Namibia Statistics Agency. And then the Financial Intelligence Center, these are the ones that mainly deal with money laundering related. And then, so with regard to the illicit financial flows, there is a task team that was established in Namibia, 3 parties. There is your Bank of Namibia, your revenue agency, and also the financial intelligence. So they then meet on a quarterly basis to deal with the issues of illicit financial flows. But you can agree with me that there is also an illegal component which the various agencies deal with under their various laws. So if we are to speak of the plans and the strategies that we have, it's mainly coming from the Tambo Mbeki report, which is then surrounding the trade misinvoicing. But as I have said, that the other parties like the Financial Intelligence Center, obviously their responsibility also spend to the others. And so are the others in the country, like your anti-corruption. So from the task team, most of our strategies are then centering around 3 main ones, is coming from the Mbeki report. The first one is we want to increase the financial transparency. The second one, which is then very much in line with the pilot study, is that we want to be able to reliably quantify what is the level of illicit financial flows in Namibia and eventually get to perform a national risk assessment. And the third objective is that one which is then increasing the collaboration, because I mean, it goes without saying that the gaps that are between various agencies, be it in systems and things, it's also what the other people capitalize on. So if we come to increasing financial transparency, I think I would just want to mention 2 key projects that we are doing there, just to come up with a system that will put together the data in terms of movement of goods and also the payments, so that eventually we have that one system that can help the various regulators then deal with identification of illicit flows and also to stop the duplication. Secondly, under this, there is also another enhancement on side of our NEMRA, because right now they are the one that also deal with valuation of goods when they are passing by the borders, to try and detect when people are trying to evade various duties and tax. And the work that they are doing there, they also want to enhance it by just automating some of the database there so that the evaluation process can take place automatically. And also now on the second one, to measure the illicit financial flows, there has been maybe previous studies that we have done in the country. So, but these have focused mostly on trade asymmetry, where we have then compared at an aggregate level some of the data that we have in Namibia from our research, comparing it to South Africa and also the other CMA countries to try and identify then what gaps can we see. And definitely we did find gaps, but we also saw that some of the gaps are valid, like they are valid. And I mean, some of the challenges that we had was then because you are at an aggregate level, we were not able to move to granularity to identify the entities that are then fueling the illicit financial flows, and actually to be able to go in the details so that eventually you are able to bring them to book. And out of all the studies that we have done, the other one was also domestic, where we have compared the import and export data, the one that the Exchange Control Unit has, and also the one that our research has. And again, we found gaps there. But I mean, now what we have learned out of these exercises is that it's better when you are also identifying at the transactional level, maybe the work that the various regulators are doing, be it on-site, be it off-site, and all the others, so that you are then able to get to specific transactions, be able to evaluate this in terms of pricing, and then from there you get to your illicit financial flows and probably get to a level where you do further investigations and then recover. But I mean, as it has been known, this method is much slower. And probably that's then when we are looking at, we want then to look at what will come out of the pilot study, just so that we'll then make our process at least much smoother. And then if we look at the most relevant illicit financial flows in our country, those that we have noted is then your tax evasion, your trade misinvoicing, and then very interestingly, but we are still trying to get our hands onto this one, is then the issue of profit shifting by multinational companies. I mean, there are other ones that your anti-corruption and our FIC are dealing with, these ones that are related then to corruption, the drugs, the smuggling, and then those crime related. So the industries where most problems are coming from, we have noted the mining, and it's no surprise because then we do have mineral resources, and then the fisheries, the construction, and the others. In terms of the flow or the commodity types, we note this mostly in your import, your export, but surprisingly of recent, we are also then seeing it in the services. And this includes now your management consultation and just general financial services as well. So in terms of activities, I mean, what we noted is your over and acting goods and pricing towards your non-taxable items like freight and insurance, so that they can then avoid tariffs and tax on the other side. At customs, we also noted maybe multiple invoicing, and then the forced declaration of goods. I think we've been battling with this one where they were categorizing, they were using wrong categorization, and it was then having an impact on us identifying the specific IFF. So yeah, so these are the items that we have noted most. And then coming through now from in terms of our expectations, I mean, as was already indicated, we have tried various methodologies. So we are then interested to know and participate in the methodologies that will be undertaken in this study, just to help us move over some of the challenges we have noted. So if we can pinpoint maybe to 3 types that we are interested. The first one is then the trade misinvoicing, but then also the cousin, which is the tax evasion, both on the goods and services. And the new one is in the transfer pricing. I mean, we're also interested just to learn about the tools that will be able to help us measure your other types, like maybe your drug smuggling, migrants, and all that. So we'll also be interested to just have those tools and probably at a later stage also try it. I think before I conclude, I would like also to add that our Financial Intelligence Center, they've just concluded their national risk assessment. And of course, one key element that they've also estimated there was the trade misinvoicing, in addition, obviously, to all the others as it falls in their mandate. So with that, we thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Pepenla, for sharing this and giving us a good disposition of what is happening in Namibia. Did you say that actually you had also invited some people from Lesotho and Eswatini? That was very generous of you. Thank you very much. If they are on the call, please, you are welcome. This is an African project and we are facing a common problem. Please let us hold together and try to see how we can address it. So, I'm not terribly sure whether we have someone from Cameroon. If we don't have anyone from Cameroon, please allow me to say that I think you will agree with me that the exchange, the sharing has been very rich, and it might have stimulated your appetite to know a little bit more, even share more. So feel free to raise your hand or post in the chat, but raise your hand at this moment so that we can hear from each other. Oh, I understand that, okay, even though we don't have Cameroon, I think we do have Zambia online. Is Zambia ready? Who is presenting from Zambia? Ah, wonderful. So sorry. So I didn't mean to miss you out. You know, the problem
I was almost getting worried.
Your name starts with Z, and we tend not to look very far from Z, but next time you're going to prioritize Z. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. Please, can you load the presentation? Can you load the presentation? Yes. Load the presentation. Let us hear from you, sir. Thank you very much.
Are you able to see our presentation?
I can see the presentation. I hope the others can see the presentation too.
Okay, I'm presenting on behalf of Zambia. My name is Katulas Nyangwe from the Financial Intelligence Center. However, on the call, we have colleagues from the Bank of Zambia, from the Zambia Revenue Authority, from Zambia's Statistical Agency, and Zambia's Institute of Policy Research, Policy Analysis and Research. So I'll quickly take you through based on the guidance that we were given, like my other colleagues have also indicated. I'll firstly run through some of the initiatives that at a national level that we have in terms of curbing IFFs. So the country has not adopted a national strategy and plan specific to IFFs, but the country has developed a national anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism policy and strategy, which we are in the process of adopting. And like you've probably heard in the previous throughout this workshop, aspects of IFF are contained in, or money laundering, as most of the predicate offenses to money laundering are the ones that generate the funds for IFFs, and as such, the national anti-money laundering policy that the country is developing and is in the process of adopting has aspects of combating IFFs. So though we don't have a specific strategy that is specific to IFFs, our national strategy on anti-money laundering has aspects that assist the country in curbing IFFs. Further, as a country, we do not have specific interagency initiatives that are solely dedicated to curbing IFFs. However, there are fora that have been created for competent authorities to collaborate and share information on combating financial crimes, including, this obviously includes IFFs. Some of these forums include the Anti-Money Laundering Authority, which is at policy level and formulates policy, and is composed of various law enforcement agencies and supervisory authorities like the Bank of Zambia. We have the Zambia Police, the Financial Intelligence Center, the Drug Enforcement Commission. So it's a host of stakeholders that are involved in combating financial crimes. We also have a national task force of senior officials. This also is made up of different agencies in Zambia, though not specifically created for IFFs, but it's created to combat financial crimes. And in that regard, IFFs are also discussed and plans are put in place to combat IFFs at national level. Briefly, steps that Zambia has taken to curb IFFs include our revenue authority and government have been strengthening our tax regime and also strengthening mechanisms to track outputs from extractive industries. As you probably may be aware that most of the IFFs in Zambia could be coming from extractive industries. I think our experience could be the same as Namibia had indicated in the last in their presentation. Further, the country also operationalized the Financial Intelligence Center, and we are coming from a mutual evaluation exercise, which has resulted in the country strengthening its anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism regime. As you may understand, in terms of keeping IFFs, the Financial Intelligence Unit and in general our AML regime play a very critical role, and that's why it's been prioritized, and that's one measure that the country has taken to strengthen its infrastructure as regards combating IFFs. Then Zambia is also a participating country in the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, which basically tries to ensure transparency in the extractive industries. Institutions that we have identified as having expertise and data and could work as a team in terms of participating in this project include the Financial Intelligence Center, the Zambia Revenue Authority, the Bank of Zambia, Ministry of Mines, Zambia Statistical Agency, and the Zambia Institute of Policy Analysis and Research. As regards the overview of IFFs in Zambia, so as a country, Zambia has not undertaken a national study to estimate IFFs. In this regard, we do not have a consolidated figure that we can put out and say IFFs emanating from Zambia could be this much. However, figures could be sitting in various competent authorities, and rough estimates could be sitting with various agencies within Zambia, depending on the prism within which they look at the issue or their mandate allows them to look at the issue. I should add that the Financial Intelligence Center is currently trying to undertake a study to estimate the value, quantify the value of trade-based money laundering, which you would understand that largely is a subset of IFFs. We hope that we can estimate and feed into government policy direction. As regards the estimation, however, though the country has not estimated, there are estimates that non-state actors have done. Some estimates are around $8.8 billion US. I think that was the global financial integrity that did that estimate on Zambia. I think the Thabo Mbeki report could have indicated something to the range of 9% of GDP in terms of the extent of the problem in Zambia. And the main sources of IFFs from our end, from what we observe and in most of the studies done by non-state actors, include commercial activities, corruption, and criminal activities. In terms of the commercial activities, you find that mostly in this category, it's issues of tax evasion that we've seen. In terms of corruption, you find that it's mostly inflating of a pricing of public government contracts. In criminal activities, it's issues around drug trafficking. I should add that Zambia undertook its national risk assessment in terms of money laundering national risk assessment, and the top predicate offenses that were reviewed were tax evasion, corruption, and drug trafficking and fraud. So those could be the main sources of IFFs that emanate from Zambia. Privileged methods include transference pricing, tax evasion, like I said, and aggressive tax avoidance, public procurement corruption, and public investments. Industries and sectors, mostly like I earlier indicated, it's extractive industries, manufacturing, and public sector. Commodities and activities most affected, copper, which is the Zambia's biggest foreign earner. Then we have precious stones and metals, consumer goods, and government projects. And the main perpetrators include multinationals, and these could be in the traditional multinationals, public sector officials, and also in the recent past, we've observed a trend where foreign nationals that set up operation within Zambia, not necessarily that they've set up a multinational, but they set up operations, businesses within the country, are also perpetrators in terms of evading tax and sending the proceeds of their business to their countries of origin. As regards our expectations from the project, one, we are firstly excited with this project and are enthusiastic to participate because of the importance of measuring IFFs. As you know, there's a famous saying that what doesn't get measured doesn't get done. I hope I've got it right, but the importance of measuring this so that then we can find ways that we can adequately curb and address it. So we hope this project will assist Zambia estimate the volumes of IFFs. Further, we are excited that this project may serve as a basis for Zambia to engage and learn from other countries within the region. Already this interaction that we've had today has sort of given us an experience of how other African countries are trying to curb IFFs and issues that initiatives that they've put in place. Lastly, but not the least, we hope that the results of estimating and estimating IFFs in the country will help us as a country set up multi-agency initiatives that are specific to IFFs, because it's one of the biggest threats to domestic resource mobilization, and currently those are some of the live challenges that as a country we are facing. So if we could use this project as a springboard for agencies within the country to start to have a conversation around how we can have specific initiatives to deal with IFFs, I think that is our expectation, and that's something that we are looking forward to as a result of this project. That's where we end our presentation for Zambia. Thank you very much. I hope we are audible enough and clear for everyone to.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this rich exchange. The more I've listened to the different presentations, the more I feel like we are all in the same mind, pulling in the same direction. We seem to have read the script together, and our expectations are good because they seem to be aligned. Now, you have heard the different countries they've shared, and I'm sure some of you might be having some burning questions you want to ask, so that either we answer them or the member states who have presented answer them. And you have seen the appreciation of the platform that we are able to interact and share experiences. Please, don't be shy now. Let us know who wants to take the floor, and we'll let them take the floor immediately. Who wants to go first? And I said this, and I can see the whole screen. Please, if you'd like to take, the floor, feel free to take the floor. I don't see anyone else raising a hand. If you are ready, unmute yourself and speak up.
Thank you, Alan. It's been very interesting to listen to the presentations by countries, and we certainly look forward to working together with you. From UNCTAD perspective, this is when we are really getting started. We have worked for several years to develop the concept, the scope, and methodologies, and taking stock of all the work of the Mbeki high-level panel and other international research. And only when we can really get started with countries where you review the methodologies and see what you can do with in the national context with your data and your methodologies, that's when we are really in serious business, and we can refine the methodologies and provide tools that can be used across countries that really actually fit different country contexts. We will tell you more about the methods tomorrow to show that there are alternative methods for different data environments. And we're hoping that there is a way to progress for any country that is interested in measuring IFFs. So just to thank you for the first country presentations. It's been very enlightening to listen to your national priorities and work to date. So thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Anu, for reorienting us and reminding us the spirit in which this is being done and what is going to be done and what we shall have tomorrow. I'm glad to say that we have two offers. We have Shishikawe and Brian. Shall we start with Shishikawe and then we go to Brian? Shishikawe, please.
Thanks, Alan.
Did I pronounce it right? I hope I didn't murder your name. I'm so sorry.
You did your best.
Thank you.
It's okay. It's Chisikau is Victor here in South Africa. Hi, Alan. Hi, Anu. Just a quick one. I think it probably applies maybe to most of the presentation. I think one thing that I still think maybe I'm not getting out of the presentation is whether we are also looking at legislative frameworks in our respective countries to enable us to deal with this, because I know we're focusing mostly on the technical aspect, but in terms of legislations, I'm not getting what other country experiences are, whether they have to focus a lot on getting the legislative framework in place to enable them to do this, or the framework is already there, especially when you hear that institutions that are assisting in this work cut across. It's not just central banks or statistics. There are other agencies involved. So, maybe if people can also share that aspect, so at least we can learn in terms of what the experiences have been and what other countries have done to enable this work to happen within their countries. Thanks so much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Next time I'll remember to say it properly. Sisikawe.
No, you did say it properly. It's fine.
Thank you very much. You're very gracious. Brian, please.
Thank you, Alan. Tizikawe is a very good neighbor of mine. He has taken the words out of my mouth. I think the one key issue that we have been traversing this whole afternoon is really the technical aspect, but in terms of outcomes of measuring IFFs, I wanted to hear from member countries whether they have particular legislation that deals with IFF. I take it that we have fragmented pieces of legislation that deals with specific issues or specific identifiers of IFF. But I wanted to hear the experience in other countries, whether they are considering to legislate specifically for IFF as an umbrella phenomenon. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that, Brian. I think colleagues have taken note. Marceline. Marceline, please take the floor.
Merci, bonsoir à tous. Marcelin Diengui, vous me recevez?
Oui, we can hear you loud and clear.
Ok, merci. Donc, en lien avec les questions, les deux dernières questions sur le cadre législatif, le cadre institutionnel, en fait, lorsqu'on évoque les pays tout à l'heure, lorsqu'ils ont présenté, lorsqu'on évoque le rapport Thabo Mbeki sur la lutte contre les flux financiers illicites et le programme accéléré de lutte contre les flux financiers illicites, on peut les résumer à peu près en 5 rubriques. Il y a une qui touche forcément les aspects de politique. On ne peut pas mettre en œuvre des projets, des programmes et tout ce qui s'ensuit derrière si le cadre institutionnel, on va dire juridique et réglementaire n'est pas mis en place. Donc, il y a ce cadre-là, c'est le premier. Ensuite, il y a les questions de transparence financière. Il y a les questions d'application même de la loi. Il y a les questions de lutte contre la fraude et l'évasion, ça a été expliqué. Il y a les questions de criminalité économique ou criminalité transverse. Mais je reste également un peu sur ma faim sur les présentations qui ont été faites parce que les pays qui ne l'ont pas encore démarré, le Gabon ou les nouveaux là qui intègrent, on devait normalement s'appuyer sur les expériences de ceux qui ont déjà commencé. Et notamment, si on prend le point sur le cadre réglementaire, je me suis posé la même question. Qu'est-ce qui devra être fait ou qu'est-ce qui a été fait au niveau des études, des évaluations préliminaires, qui a à faire? Les agences, tout ça, ça a été évoqué par toutes les présentations, le renforcement des capacités, etc. Si on prend le cadre sur la transparence, c'est pareil. Sur qu'est-ce qui a été fait concrètement sur les politiques, sur les données ouvertes, sur les registres en ligne, sur les sociétés. On a évoqué la question des passations des marchés. Qu'est-ce qui a été fait en lien avec les normes? Il y a des normes OCDS qu'on sait qui existent. Est-ce qu'ils ont... Est-ce que le projet teste sur ces choses-là ou pas? Il y a les aspects sur l'Open Government Partnership, le partenariat global, gouvernemental global. On aimerait, au-delà de ce qu'ils ont testé techniquement, est-ce qu'il y a autre chose qu'ils ont fait dont nous, on peut tirer profit, le Gabon et les autres pays qui intègrent le projet? Sur l'application, par exemple, bon, il parle de fausse facturation au niveau des transferts, etc. Qu'est-ce qui a été fait exactement? Sur les questions de criminalité, est-ce que les aspects sur les diligences raisonnables en lien avec les aspects bancaires et tout ça, est-ce qu'il y a des choses qui ont été testées? Est-ce que ça va jusque-là ou est-ce que c'est en prévision? Voilà, on reste, même si nous, bon, le Gabon n'a pas encore commencé ça, on intègre la phase pilote, mais c'est des choses qu'on aimerait aussi essayer d'avoir comme perspective. Il y a pas mal de choses qui ont été faites au Gabon, hein, sans cadre de FFI. Là, vous allez voir la présentation demain, elle est succincte, c'est résumé, mais au-delà de ça, il y a plusieurs acquis, il y a beaucoup de choses qui ont été faites un peu de manière éparse, mais tout ça consolidé, je pense que ça donne un bon cadre. Et je termine par là, c'est la problématique sur la donnée elle-même, la stratégie de production et divulgation des données, toutes les questions sur l'assurance qualité, les données, etc. Et la question sur la modélisation, parce qu'il y a quelqu'un qui posait la question sur mais comment est-ce qu'on fait pour obtenir des données sur des opérations qui sont illicites, quelque chose qui n'est pas visible, etc. Donc, le volet de la modélisation des modèles économétriques, je ne sais pas si tout ça est utilisé dans le cadre de ce projet. Voilà, j'ai posé plusieurs questions comme ça. C'est en lien aussi avec ce qu'on fera demain. Donc, ceux qui ont présenté là les pays, s'ils peuvent revenir demain, parce qu'on va vers la fin, je pense, de l'atelier, s'ils peuvent revenir demain avec des commentaires, des compléments, ce serait bien. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Marceline. And I noticed that you are really into this because you have given it quite a deep thought. And I'm very grateful that actually I've given it this deep thought because you have read our minds. Many of the things that you are talking about have been considered. And we must apologize that I think it is us who have to take the blame for not giving you the full monty in terms of the things that you're expecting to get from the country representations, because we gave some guidelines just to give a sense of what actually is happening on the ground. One of the key things that we're thinking is going to happen. Sorry, I think I'm torpedoing the proceedings of this workshop, but by tomorrow you will have realized that what we are planning to do is we have this as a global continental meeting for those countries that have accepted to pilot the methodologies. And we're exchanging views. After these views, we are going to have to deal with each country individually to look at the idiosyncrasies within the country. And we shall look at a whole gamut of things. One of the key things that we shall do is an assessment. And that assessment is going to look into some of those things that you have, for instance, mentioned. So let me not torpedo some of the answers that other people are going to be giving. But let me invite Ricardo. I think there was another hand from Ricardo. Let us hear from Ricardo before we ask other people to respond to some of the questions that have been raised. Ricardo, yes. Go on,
okay.
Please.
Ok, obrigado. Obrigado. O que eu queria contribuir era em resposta à pergunta do nosso colega da África do Sul relativamente a se existem legislações específicas nos países para regular essa questão dos fluxos financeiros ilícitos. A contribuição que eu quero dar é que nos países, e tenho quase a certeza, porque a maior parte dos países são membros do GAFI, ou de um GAFI regional, e que há um conjunto de estruturas em cada um dos países que há uma obrigação de produzir um conjunto de estatísticas onde nós conseguimos recolher esse resultado que nós pretendemos dos fluxos financeiros ilícitos. Portanto, nessa ordem de ideias, não é... Na generalidade, não é necessário que existam novas leis para que esse resultado seja obtido. Portanto, todo o país que é membro, direto ou indiretamente, do GAFI, não é, tem esse tipo de obrigações e, nestas obrigações, ela já consegue obter o resultado de recolher de forma estatística esses fluxos financeiros ilícitos. Portanto, é esta contribuição que eu queria dar. Obrigado.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. Thank you very much, Ricardo, for that submission. And I believe that our colleague, Sulaiman Dawood has a point or two to make. Sulaiman?
Yes, yes, Doctor. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's so good to see you. Yeah.
Good to see you again. Good to see you again.
Yeah,
Sulaiman.
good to see you again. Yeah. No, listen, I just wanted to express our profound gratitude for this opportunity. Obviously, we've had that live experience when you were in Nigeria, and we're hoping to build on that. So in terms of Nigeria, you've also got our mappings in terms of what we've been done, and then obviously I'm sure our country presenter will also shed the light more, perhaps, I think in due course, today or tomorrow, and the report I'm sure has been shared. But I wanted to pick up on the just one or 2 points. One is what the South African gentleman, Mr. Chiki, sorry, I wouldn't attempt. Yes, right. See, what I like the way he kind of draws back to another point, another very vital point in terms of legislation to back up the whole process. And I hear, Ricardo, what has been said in terms of, maybe you can just crack on with it. I'm not sure whether I got that point clear, but he seems to be saying you probably don't need much of legislation, but what is on the ground. I may have misunderstood his point, but I just want to re-emphasize that point that the South African man has pointed out. And just to address that on our part in Nigeria, and I hope my presenter perhaps may not miss out this, we have recognized the importance of having a solid legislative framework or legal framework in place, whilst we are also embarking on all these assessment and mappings and obviously all this methodology of curbing illicit financial flow. We have reviewed for instance, we have reviewed our money laundering laws recently. We're right about going through that in terms of strengthening the reporting mechanism, strengthening penalty, and the all that KYC and the rest of it to speak to the IFF more so. That is the matter that is within the National Assembly at the moment. And we hopefully, with coming from this workshop also perhaps will enable us to further strengthen that. So what I'm saying is we're constantly recognizing the need to have a legal framework in place. Whether or not it's actually being implemented, I will address that on the second leg of my discussion. Just one more point. We also have what is called a process of crime bill that is also going side aside our review of the Money Laundering Act presently. And then we also have the audit bill, which is meant to strengthen the whole process of audit. With strengthening our Auditor General's office as a pivotal institution in the IFF, which is what really the concentration should be. What is our auditors doing? What are they doing? Are they working well as they should be? Are they be able to identify the lapses, these loopholes that all these illicit financial flows going through? So, and all the rest of the other legal framework that we're also strengthening up in relation to that, along with other institutions. But that is one thing. But obviously, on the other hand, most importantly as well, is what is the political will? And I think that is where we all need to work together, because we can go on and on about these technical mappings, methodology, but the question is, are we ready in Africa? All these institutions, United Nations, everyone, they are trying to help us to curb this. Are our leaders ready to implement? Our legislators, are they ready to actually pass these relevant bill laws? Because we have experience of that we have to be twisting and tweaking with the legislators to actually lobby them to pass this relevant legislation, amazingly. But having said that, that's not, again, let me move away from the technical passage of bill or the law, or in terms of implementation. It seems that if all our effort is not addressing that political will issue, then we will just be stumbling and rising and falling. And so I'm hoping that somewhere along the line, we'll be able to find a ground that we all can map out how all of this political will, the necessary checks and balances could be, if this framework and methodology will help in setting up a checks and balances that will actually help, which regardless of political will or something, you know. So that's what I will say. But finally, just before you get tired of me, is the need that, another point is that whether you look at it, the current approach to all of these IFF issues, and I think I've heard one of the presenters saying that, whether it's Ricardo or somebody, that it is also the attitude is to treat it as dealing with corruption issue, and so including all the agencies. So they are looking at it more in terms of fighting corruption, the usual way, which is in their enabling law, and not in the reality, which I'm glad that this is where this becomes relevant. Opening our eyes to the reality that you need to be dealing with illicit financial flow, not so much as the mainstream dealing with corruption, but for your own good, for your financial resources, mobilization, or the rest of it, that you need to find a way to be managing this. Otherwise, if it becomes an ordinary fighting corruption and, you know, where's your money, failure to declare that, and not a mainstream of how do we curb it in terms of limiting that sort of damage. I think that is where obviously all our discussion will be driving towards, and I'm sure we can all arrive at that destination. And I thank you so much for giving me that opportunity, Doctor. Thank you.
Wonderful, Sulaiman. Wonderful. So thank you so much, because I think you have reminded me of one of the duties that I should have performed much earlier on, is to share with the participants that the Economic Commission for Africa carried out a study on the institutional architecture to address illicit financial flows from Africa. This was launched last year in October, and the main report is coming out soon. But what this report is looking at, it is looking at the different institutional arrangements that are required, from policies and strategies at the national level, from the legislative or the legal frameworks within the countries, from the operations in terms of the ecosystem of IFFs, which institutions are actually operating in this space, what their mandates are these mandates enabling or inhibiting in terms of progressing towards curbing IFFs. Also, looking at the whole gamut of things required to address tax evasion, trade misinvoicing, IFFs through the financial systems, as well as corruption, which complements and sits very well with this particular project. So these projects are synergetic. The issues that have been raised are very important issues and actually have been addressed to some extent in other in other pieces of work, which are also supporting this work. So I think tomorrow, when we discuss a bit more, what you have done is given us a bit of some homework for our presenters tomorrow to try also when they are presenting illuminate a little bit in terms of, for instance, what are the legal frameworks are in their countries, because I think we did not ask that from the member states, so they didn't prepare for that. But if you can quickly give us a sense of what is happening there, we know that it is important, as Shizikawa has said, it is very important. You can't do very much technically without acting within, it's a bureaucracy, without acting within a legal framework. So all this will need to be addressed at some point. But then again, this is a two half-day workshop. After this, we are going to have a deeper engagement within each country to look at the whole gamut of needs, from the legal framework to the operational side of things, what exactly is happening on the ground, even on operationally, how are agencies collaborating within the ecosystem of IFFs, what do they need? Do they have that? Are they coordinating? Is it in real time? Is it making sense for them to be able to curb IFFs going forward? I know there have been comments, especially on the informal sector, but also other sectors. We will have to look at this from a country by country perspective going forward. So allow me, unless there's someone else who wants to share something, because we are running out of time, we have about a minute to go. Allow me to appreciate you for this first day. It has been fantabulous listening to you, the presenters, but also those who have poked us with very key questions to stimulate our thinking and remind us which areas actually we should be looking at. And of course, those who have shared with us what it is that this project is about, the progress that we have made so far, and also tomorrow, those who are going to share with us more information. Let us prepare. I think one of the things that have been asked to mention here is that all this information is going to be on the website and will be accessible to you all. Where we are lying behind a little bit is the translation. Most of it is in English, some of it is in different language, French and Portuguese. But what we are trying to do now is to make sure that it is translated and all that information is available to you at any time. And should you require anything at any time, feel free to approach us, and we shall be able to interact with you and provide what is necessary. So, Anu, is there anything else that you want to add for this first day before we retire people and ask them to come back tomorrow revigorated with a few promises? Over to you, Anu.
Thank you very much, Alan. You shouldn't have asked me, because I'm a big fan of statistical legislation. Some years ago, I was involved in coordinating the development of global model statistical law. But here we're talking about a much wider topic, the legal framework that affects the measurement of IFFs. It is many legal frameworks that actually come to play. And there we talk about the mandate of each agency, who can use and access data, what is the legal framework for exchanging data nationally between the authorities. Do the authorities have rights to access administrative data? Do they have rights to access privately held data like big data that was mentioned? And is there a legal possibility to exchange data with authorities of other countries, which also comes to play when you look at trade asymmetries, for instance, and if you would like to improve the measurement of IFFs related to trade misinvoicing, and you're looking at the aggregate statistics, you would first want to improve harmonization between different countries and their statistics, and see if there are statistical discrepancies. So many different laws. We need to consider the statistical, the customs, criminal law, money laundering laws, whatever laws there are in the country. So definitely we need to work in the national context, and therefore we first have planned the review of the agencies that have mandates that relate to IFFs. Even if it's sometimes remote, it can make a difference. Then we talk about tax, customs, law enforcement, and many others who have a mandate to somehow approach the IFFs and who might have data that will be needed. And then this involves a review of data availability across the agencies and a discussion of what can be done within the current mandates of the agencies in the country within the current legal frameworks. And this can also include a review of where there are issues and challenges, what changes should be done in the legislation in an ideal environment for the measurement of IFFs. But it can well be that we have to just live with the current conditions in the countries. So sorry to take so much time, but it's a really interesting discussion, and we can continue that tomorrow, and you'll hear more about the other countries' experience and hopefully from the legal perspective as well. Thanks a lot for sharing. And tomorrow there will be also more information on the steps and tools for the pilots and the methodologies themselves.
And thank you very much, especially our colleagues from South Africa. I understand today is a public holiday in South Africa, but you've kept with us. Thank you very much. Yes. A massive thank you to everybody from the West Coast to the East Coast. And we see you tomorrow again. I'm going to say at 1400 hours, and then they will shoot me in the head because 1400 hours at Addis Ababa time is different times in different places. Please check the agenda, which shows exactly what time it is in your own country. And we meet tomorrow. Have a great evening. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, the same time. Have a nice evening.
You.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Merci beaucoup. À demain.
Merci.
See you tomorrow.
Merci. À demain.
Merci. Au revoir. À demain.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Very much. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.
Excellent.
Bye.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Bye.
I wanted to ask you,